Welcome to Audiobook Empire. You are about to listen to The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill, Volume 3 of 8, covering initiative and leadership and imagination. This is the legendary 24-lesson course Napoleon Hill spent 20 years building and the direct foundation behind Think and Grow Rich. Narrated by Michael Stone. Sit back and let's begin. Lesson 5, Initiative and Leadership. When you do not know what to do or which way to turn, smile. This will relax your mind and let the sunshine of happiness into your soul. Lesson 5, Initiative and Leadership. You can do it if you believe you can. Before you proceed to the mastery of this lesson, your attention is directed to the fact that there is perfect coordination of thought running throughout this course. You will observe that the entire 16 lessons harmonize and blend with each other so that they constitute a perfect chain that has been built, link by link, out of the factors that enter into the development of power through organized effort. You will observe also that the same fundamental principles of applied psychology form the foundation of each of these 16 lessons, although different application is made of these principles in each of the lessons. This lesson on initiative and leadership follows the lesson on self-confidence for the reason that no one could become an efficient leader or take the initiative in any great undertaking without belief in himself. Initiative and leadership are associated terms in this lesson for the reason that leadership is essential for the attainment of success, and initiative is the very foundation upon which this necessary quality of leadership is built. Initiative is as essential to success as a hub is essential to a wagon wheel. And what is initiative? It is that exceedingly rare quality that prompts, nay, impels, a person to do that which ought to be done without being told to do it. Elbert Hubbard expressed himself on the subject of initiative in the words, "The world bestows its big prizes both in money and honors for one thing, and that is initiative. What is initiative? I'll tell you. It is doing the right thing without being told. But next to doing the right thing without being told is to do it when you are told once. That is, say, carry the message to Garcia. Those who can carry a message get high honors, but their pay is not always in proportion. Next, there are those who do the right thing when necessity kicks them from behind, and these get indifference instead of honors and a pittance for pay. This kind spend most of the time polishing a bench with a hard luck story. Then, still lower down in the scale than this, we have the fellow who will not do the right thing even when someone goes along to show him how and stays to see that he does it. He is always out of a job or receives the contempt he deserves, unless he has a rich pa, in which case destiny patiently waits around 1116 comer with a stuffed club. To which class do you belong? Inasmuch as you will be expected to take inventory of yourself and determine which of the 15 factors of this course you need most. After you have completed the 16th lesson, it may be well if you begin to get ready for this analysis by answering the question that Elbert Hubbard has asked: to which class do you belong? One of the peculiarities of leadership is the fact that it is never found in those who have not acquired the habit of taking the initiative. Leadership is something that you must invite yourself into. It will never thrust itself upon you. If you will carefully analyze all leaders whom you know, you will see that they not only exercised initiative, but they went about their work with a definite purpose in mind. You will also see that they possessed that quality described in the 3rd lesson of this course, self-confidence. These facts are mentioned in this lesson for the reason that it will profit you to observe that successful people make use of all the factors covered by the 16 lessons of the course, and for the more important reason that it will profit you to understand thoroughly the principle of organized effort, which this reading course is intended to establish in your mind. This seems an appropriate place to state that this course is not intended as a shortcut to success, nor is it intended as a mechanical formula that you may use in noteworthy achievement without effort on your part. The real value of the course lies in the use that you will make of it, and not in the course itself. The chief purpose of the course is to help you develop in yourself the 15 qualities covered by the 16 lessons of the course, and one of the most important of these qualities is initiative, the subject of this lesson. We will now proceed to apply the principle upon which this lesson is founded by describing, in detail, just how it served successfully to complete a business transaction, which most people would call difficult. In 191/6, I needed $25,000 with which to create an educational institution, but I had neither this sum nor sufficient collateral with which to borrow it through the usual banking sources. Did I bemoan my fate or think of what I might accomplish if some rich relative or good Samaritan would come to my rescue by loaning me the necessary capital? I did nothing of the sort. I did just what you will be advised throughout this course to do. First of all, I made the securing of this capital my definite chief aim. Second, I laid out a complete plan through which to transform this aim into reality. Backed by sufficient self-confidence and spurred on by initiative, I proceeded to put my plan into action. But before the action stage of the plan had been reached, more than 6 weeks of constant, persistent study and effort and thought were embodied in it. If a plan is to be sound, it must be built of carefully chosen material. You will here observe the application of the principle of organized effort, through the operation of which it is possible for one to ally or associate several interests in such a way that each of these interests is greatly strengthened and each supports all the others, just as one link in a chain supports all the other links. I wanted this $25,000 in capital for the purpose of creating a school of advertising and salesmanship. 2 things were necessary for the organization of such a school. One was the $25,000 capital, which I did not have, and the other was the proper course of instruction, which I did have. My problem was to ally myself with some group of men who needed that which I had, and who would supply the $25,000. This alliance had to be made through a plan that would benefit all concerned. After my plan had been completed, and I was satisfied that it was equitable and sound, I laid it before the owner of a well-known and reputable business college, which just then was finding competition quite keen, and was badly in need of a plan for meeting this competition. My plan was presented in about these words: whereas you have one of the most reputable business colleges in the city, and whereas you need some plan with which to meet the stiff competition in your field, and whereas your good reputation has provided you with all the credit you need, and whereas I have the plan that will help you meet this competition successfully. Be it resolved that we ally ourselves through a plan that will give you that which you need, and at the same time supply me with something which I need. Then I proceeded to unfold my plan further in these words. I have written a very practical course on advertising and salesmanship. Having built this course out of my actual experience in training and directing salesmen, and my experience in planning, and the space you occupy and the authority you exercise may be measured with mathematical exactness by the service you render. Directing many successful advertising campaigns, I have back of it plenty of evidence of its soundness. If you will use your credit in helping market this course, I will place it in your business college as one of the regular departments of your curriculum and take entire charge of this newly created department. No other business college in the city will be able to meet your competition, for the reason that no other college has such a course as this. The advertising that you do in marketing this course will serve also to stimulate the demand for your regular business course. You may charge the entire amount that you spend for this advertising to my department, and the advertising bill will be paid out of that department, leaving you the accumulative advantage that will accrue to your other departments without cost to you. Now I suppose you will want to know where I profit by this transaction, and I will tell you. I want you to enter into a contract with me in which it will be agreed that when the cash receipts from my department equal the amount that you have paid out or contracted to pay out for advertising, my department and my course in advertising and salesmanship become my own, and I may have the privilege of separating this department from your school and running it under my own name. The plan was agreeable and the contract was closed. Please keep in mind that my definite purpose was to secure the use of $25,000 for which I had no security to offer. In a little less than a year, the business college had paid out slightly more than $25,000 for advertising and marketing my course and the other expenses incidental to the operation of this newly organized department. While the department had collected and turned back to the college in tuition fees a sum equaling the amount the college had spent, and I took the department over as a going and self-sustaining business, according to the terms of my contract. As a matter of fact, this newly created department not only served to attract students for the other departments of the college, but at the same time, the tuition fees collected through this new department were sufficient to place it on a self-sustaining basis before the end of the first year. Now you can see that while the college did not loan me 1 penny of actual capital, it nevertheless supplied me with credit which served exactly the same purpose. I said that my plan was founded upon equity, that it contemplated a benefit to all parties concerned. The benefit accruing to me was the use of the $25,000, which resulted in an established and self-sustaining business by the end of the first year. The benefit accruing to the college was the student cured for its regular commercial and business course as a result of the money spent in advertising my department, all advertising having been done under the name of the college. Today, that business college is one of the most successful schools of its kind, and it stands as a monument of sound evidence with which to demonstrate the value of allied effort. This incident has been related, not alone because it shows the value of initiative and leadership, but for the reason that it leads up to the subject covered by the next lesson of this reading course on the law of success, which is imagination. There are generally many plans through the operation of which a desired object may be achieved, and it often happens to be true that the obvious and usual methods employed are not the best. The usual method of procedure in the case related would have been that of borrowing from a bank. You can see that this method was impractical in this case for the reason that no collateral was available. A great philosopher once said, "Initiative is the passkey that opens the door to opportunity." I do not recall who this philosopher was, but I know that he was great because of the soundness of his statement. We will now proceed to outline the exact procedure that you must follow if you are to become a person of initiative and leadership. First, you must master the habit of procrastination and eliminate it from your makeup. This habit of putting off until tomorrow that which you should have done last week or last year or a score of years ago is gnawing at the very vitals of your being, and you can accomplish nothing until you throw it off. The method through which you eliminate procrastination is based upon a well-known and scientifically tested principle of psychology, which has been referred to in the 2 preceding lessons of this course as autosuggestion. Copy the following formula and place it conspicuously in your room where you will see it as you retire at night and as you arise in the morning. Initiative and leadership having chosen a definite chief aim as my life work, I now understand it to be my duty to transform this purpose into reality. Therefore, I will form the habit of taking some definite action each day that will carry me one step nearer the attainment of my definite chief aim. I know that procrastination is a deadly enemy of all who would become leaders in any undertaking, and I will eliminate this habit from my makeup by A. Doing some one definite thing each day that ought to be done without anyone telling me to do it. B. Looking around until I find at least one thing that I can do each day that I have not been in the habit of doing, and that will be of value to others without expectation of pay. C. Telling at least one other person each day of the value of practicing this habit of doing something that ought to be done without being told to do it. I can see that the muscles of the body become strong in proportion to the extent to which they are used. Therefore, I understand that the habit of initiative also becomes fixed in proportion to the extent that it is practiced. I realize that the place to begin developing the habit of initiative is in the small, commonplace things connected with my daily work. Therefore, I will go at my work each day as if I were doing it solely for the purpose of developing this necessary habit of initiative. I understand that by practicing this habit of taking the initiative in connection with my daily work, I will be not only developing that habit, but I will also be attracting the attention of those who will place greater value on my services as a result of this practice. Signed. Regardless of what you are now doing, every day brings you face to face with a chance to render some service outside of the course of your regular duties that will be of value to others. In rendering this additional service of your own accord, you of course understand that you are not doing so with the object of receiving monetary pay. You are rendering this service because it provides you with ways and means of exercising, developing and making stronger the aggressive spirit of initiative which you must possess before you can ever become an outstanding figure in the affairs of your chosen field of life work. Those who work for money alone and who receive for their pay nothing but money are always underpaid, no matter how much they receive. Money is necessary, but the big prizes of life cannot be measured in dollars and cents. No amount of money could possibly be made to take the place of the happiness and joy and pride that belong to the person who digs a better ditch, or builds a better chicken coop, or sweeps a cleaner floor, or cooks a better meal. Every normal person loves to create something that is better than the average. The joy of creating a work of art is a joy that cannot be replaced by money or any other form of material possession. I have in my employ a young lady who opens, "What helped you over the great obstacles of life?" was asked of a highly successful man. "The other obstacles," he replied, "assorts and answers much of my personal mail. She began in my employ more than 3 years ago. Then her duties were to take dictation when she was asked to do so. Her salary was about the same as that which others receive for similar service. One day I dictated the following motto which I asked her to typewrite for me: 'Remember that your only limitation is the one that you set up in your own mind.' As she handed the typewritten page back to me, she said, 'Your motto has given me an idea that is going to be of value to both you and me.' I told her I was glad to have been of service to her. The incident made no particular impression on my mind, but from that day on I could see that it had made a tremendous impression on her mind. She began to come back to the office after supper and performed service that she was neither paid for nor expected to perform. Without anyone telling her to do it, she began to bring to my desk letters that she had answered for me. She had studied my style, and these letters were attended to as well as I could have done it, in some instances much better. She kept up this habit until my personal secretary resigned. When I began to look for someone to take his place, what was more natural than to turn to this young woman to fill the place? Before I had time to give her the position, she took it on her initiative. My personal mail began to come to my desk with a new secretary's name attached, and she was that secretary. On her own time, after hours, without additional pay, she had prepared herself for the best position on my staff. But that is not all. This young lady became so noticeably efficient that she began to attract the attention of others who offered her attractive positions. I have increased her salary many times, and she now receives a salary more than 4 times as large as the amount she received when she first went to work for me as an ordinary stenographer. And to tell you the truth, I am helpless in the matter, because she has made herself so valuable to me that I cannot get along without her. That is initiative transformed into practical, understandable terms. I would be remiss in my duties if I failed to direct your attention to an advantage, other than a greatly increased salary, that this young lady's initiative has brought her. It has developed in her a spirit of cheerfulness that brings her happiness which most stenographers never know. Her work is not work, it is a great interesting game at which she is playing. Even though she arrives at the office ahead of the regular stenographers and remains there long after they have watched the clock tick off 5 o'clock in quitting time, her hours are shorter by far than are those of the other workers. Hours of labor do not drag on the hands of those who are happy at their work. This brings us to the next step in our description of the exact procedure that you must follow in developing initiative and leadership. Second, you of course understand that the only way to get happiness is by giving it away to others. The same applies to the development of initiative. You can best develop this essential quality in yourself by making it your business to interest those around you in doing the same. It is a well-known fact that a man learns best that which he endeavors to teach others. If a man embraces a certain creed or religious faith, the first thing he does is to go out and try to sell it to others. And in exact proportion to the extent to which he impresses others, does he impress himself. In the field of salesmanship, it is a well-known fact that no salesman is successful in selling others until he has first made a good job of selling himself. Stated conversely, no salesman can do his best to sell others without sooner or later selling himself that which he is trying to sell to others. Any statement that a person repeats over and over again for the purpose of inducing others to believe it, he also will come to believe, and this holds good whether the statement is false or true. You can now see the advantage of making it your business to talk initiative, think initiative, eat initiative, sleep initiative, and practice initiative. By so doing, you are becoming a person of initiative and leadership, for it is a well-known fact that people will readily, willingly, and voluntarily follow the person who shows by his actions that he is a person of initiative. In the place where you work or the community in which you live, you come in contact with other people. Make it your business to interest every one of them who will listen to you in the development of initiative. It will not be necessary for you to give your reasons for doing this, nor will it be necessary for you to announce the fact that you are doing it. Just go ahead and do it. In your own mind you will understand, of course, that you are doing it because this practice will help you and will, at least, do those whom you influence in the same practice no harm. If you wish to try an experiment that will prove both interesting and profitable to you, pick out some person of your acquaintance whom you know to be a person who never does anything that he is not expected to do, and begin selling him your idea of initiative. Do not stop by merely discussing the subject once. Keep it up every time you have a convenient opportunity. Approach the subject from a different angle each time. If you go at this experiment in a tactful and forceful manner, you will soon observe a change in the person on whom you are trying the experiment. And you will observe something else of more importance still. You will observe a change in yourself. Do not fail to try this experiment. You cannot talk initiative to others without developing a desire to practice it yourself. Through the operation of the principle of autosuggestion, every statement that you make to others leaves its imprint on your own subconscious mind, and this holds good whether your statements are false or true. You have often heard the saying, "He who lives by the sword will die by the sword." Properly interpreted, This simply means that we are constantly attracting to ourselves and weaving into our own characters and personalities those qualities which our influence is helping to create in others. If we help others develop the habit of initiative, we in turn develop this same habit. If we sow the seeds of hatred and envy and discouragement in others, we in turn develop these qualities in ourselves. This principle through which a man comes to resemble in his own nature those whom he most admires is fully brought out in Hawthorne's story, The Great Stone Face, a story that every parent should have his offspring read. We come now to the next step in our description of the exact procedure that you must follow in developing initiative and leadership. Third, before we go further, let it be understood what is meant by the term leadership, as it is used in connection with this reading course on the law of success. There are two brands of leadership, and one of them is as deadly and destructive as the other is helpful and constructive. The deadly brand, which leads not to success but to absolute failure, is the brand adopted by pseudo-leaders who force their leadership on unwilling followers. It will not be necessary here to describe this brand or to point out the fields of endeavor in which it is practiced, with the exception of the field of war, and in this field we will mention but one notable example, that of Napoleon. Napoleon was a leader, there can be no doubt about this, but he led his followers and himself to destruction. The details are recorded in the history of France and the French people, where you may study them if you choose. It is not Napoleon's brand of leadership that is recommended in this course, although I will admit that Napoleon possessed all the necessary fundamentals for great leadership, excepting one: he lacked the spirit of helpfulness to others as an objective. His desire for the power that comes through leadership was based solely upon self-aggrandizement. His desire for leadership was built upon personal ambition, and not cherish your visions and your dreams as they are the children of your soul, the blueprints of your ultimate achievements. Upon the desire to lift the French people to a higher and nobler station in the affairs of nations. The brand of leadership that is recommended through this course of instruction is the brand which leads to self-determination and freedom and self-development and enlightenment and justice. This is the brand that endures. For example, and as a contrast with the brand of leadership through which Napoleon raised himself into prominence, consider our own American commoner, Lincoln. The object of his leadership was to bring truth and justice and understanding to the people of the United States. Even though he died a martyr to his belief in this brand of leadership, his name has been engraved upon the heart of the world in terms of loving kindliness that will never bring aught but good to the world. Both Lincoln and Napoleon led armies in warfare, but the objects of their leadership were as different as night is different from day. If it would give you a better understanding of the principles upon which this reading course is based, you could easily be cited to leadership of today which resembles both the brand that Napoleon employed and that which Lincoln made the foundation of his life work. But this is not essential. Your own ability to look around and analyze men who take the leading parts in all lines of endeavor is sufficient to enable you to pick out the Lincoln as well as the Napoleon types. Your own judgment will help you decide which type you prefer to emulate. There can be no doubt in your mind as to the brand of leadership that is recommended in this reading course, and there should be no question in your mind as to which of the two brands described you will adopt as your brand. We make no recommendations on this subject, however, for the reason that this reading course has been prepared as a means of laying before its students the fundamental principles upon which power is developed, and not as a preachment on ethical conduct. We present both the constructive and the destructive possibilities of the principles outlined in this course, that you may become familiar with both, but we leave entirely to your own discretion the choice and application of these principles, believing that your own intelligence will guide you to make a wise selection. The penalty of leadership in every field of human endeavor: he that is first must perpetually live in the white light of publicity. Whether the leadership be vested in a man or in a manufactured product, emulation and envy are ever at work. In art, in literature, in music, in industry, the reward and the punishment are always the same. The reward is widespread recognition, the punishment's fierce denial and detraction. When a man's work becomes a standard for the whole world, it also becomes a target for the shafts of the envious few. If his work be merely mediocre, he will be left severely alone. If he achieve a masterpiece, it will set a million tongues a-wagging. Jealousy does not protrude its forked tongue at the artist who produces a commonplace painting. With the compliments of the Cadillac Motor Car Company, whatsoever you write or paint or play or sing or build, no one will strive to surpass or slander you, unless your work be stamped with the seal of a genius. Long, long after a great work or a good work has been done, those who are disappointed or envious continue to cry out that it cannot be done. Mean voices were raised against the author of the Law of Success before the ink was dry on the first textbooks. Poisoned pens were released against both the author and the philosophy the moment the first edition of the course was printed. Spiteful little voices in the domain of art were raised against our own Whistler as a mountebank, long after the big world acclaimed him its greatest artistic genius. Multitudes flocked to Bayreuth to worship at the musical shrine of Wagner, while the little group of those whom he had dethroned and displaced argued angrily that he was no musician at all. The little world continued to protest that Fulton could never build a steamboat, while the big world flocked to the river banks to see his boat steam by. Small, narrow voices cried out that Henry Ford would not last another year, but above and beyond the din of their childish prattle, Ford went silently about his business and made himself the richest and most powerful man on earth. The leader is assailed because he is a lighter, and the effort to equal him is merely added proof of his leadership. Failing to equal or to excel, the follower seeks to depreciate and to destroy, but only confirms the superiority of that which he strives to supplant. There is nothing new in this. It is as old as the world and as old as the human passions, envy, fear, greed, ambition, and the desire to surpass, and it all avails nothing. If the leader truly leads, he remains the leader. Master poet, master painter, master workman, each in his turn is assailed, and each holds his laurels through the ages. That which is good or great makes itself known, no matter how loud the clamor of denial. A real leader cannot be slandered or damaged by lies of the envious, because all such attempts serve only to turn the spotlight on his ability, and real ability always finds a generous following. Attempts to destroy real leadership is love's labor lost, because that which deserves to live, lives. We come back now to the discussion of the third step of the procedure that you must follow in developing initiative and leadership. This third step takes us back for a review of the principle of organized effort, as described in the preceding lessons of this course. You have already learned that no man can accomplish enduring results of a far-reaching nature without the aid and cooperation of others. You have already learned that when two or more persons ally themselves in any undertaking, in a spirit of harmony and understanding, each person in the alliance thereby multiplies his own powers of achievement. Nowhere is this principle more evidenced than it is in an industry or business in which there is perfect teamwork between the employer and the employees. Wherever you find this teamwork, you find prosperity and goodwill on both sides. Cooperation is said to be the most important word in the English language. It plays an important part in the affairs of the home, in the relationship of man and wife, parents and children. It plays an important part in the affairs of state. So important is this principle of cooperation that no leader can become powerful or last long who does not understand and apply it in his leadership. Lack of cooperation has destroyed more business enterprises than have all other causes combined. In my 25 years of active business experience and observation, I have witnessed the destruction of all manner of business enterprises because of dissension and lack of application of this principle of cooperation. In the practice of law, I have observed the destruction of homes and divorce cases without end as a result of the lack of cooperation between man and wife. In the study of the histories of nations, it becomes alarmingly obvious that lack of cooperative effort has been a curse to the human race all back down the ages. Turn back the pages of these histories and study them, and you will learn a lesson in cooperation that will impress itself indelibly upon your mind. You are paying, and your children and your children's children will continue to pay, for the cost of the most expensive and destructive war the world has ever known, because nations have not yet learned that a part of the world cannot suffer without damage and suffering to the whole world. Service, sacrifice, and self-control are three words which must be well understood by the person who succeeds in doing something that is of help to the world. This same rule applies with telling effect in the conduct of modern business and industry. When an industry becomes disorganized and torn asunder by strikes and other forms of disagreement, both the employers and employees suffer irreparable loss. But the damage does not stop here. This loss becomes a burden to the public and takes on the form of higher prices and scarcity of the necessities of life. The people of the United States who rent their homes are feeling the burden, at this very moment, of lack of cooperation between contractors and builders and the workers. So uncertain has the relationship between the contractors and their employees become that the contractors will not undertake a building without adding to the cost an arbitrary sum sufficient to protect them in the event of labor troubles. This additional cost increases rents and places unnecessary burdens upon the backs of millions of people. In this instance, the lack of cooperation between a few men places heavy and almost unbearable burdens upon millions of people. The same evil exists in the operation of our railroads. Lack of harmony and cooperation between the railroad management and the workers has made it necessary for the railroads to increase their freight and passenger rates, and this, in turn, has increased the cost of life's necessities to almost unbearable proportions. Here again, lack of cooperation between a few leads to hardship for millions of people. These facts are cited without effort or desire to place the responsibility for this lack of cooperation, since the object of this reading course is to help its students get at facts. It may be truthfully stated that the high cost of living that everywhere manifests itself today has grown out of lack of application of the principle of cooperative leadership. Those who wish to decry present systems of government and industrial management may do so, but in the final analysis, it becomes obvious to all except those who are not seeking the truth that the evils of government and of industry have grown out of lack of cooperation. Nor can it be truthfully said that all the evils of the world are confined to the affairs of state and industry. Take a look at the churches and you will observe the damaging effects of lack of cooperation. No particular church is cited, but analyze any church or group of churches where lack of coordination of effort prevails and you will see evidence of disintegration that limits the service those churches could render. For example, take the average town or small city where rivalry has sprung up between the churches and notice what has happened, especially those towns in which the number of churches is far out of proportion to the population. Through harmonized effort and through cooperation, the churches of the world could wield sufficient influence to render war an impossibility. Through this same principle of cooperative effort, the churches and the leaders of business and industry could eliminate rascality and sharp practices, and all this could be brought about speedily. These possibilities are not mentioned in a spirit of criticism, but only as a means of illustrating the power of cooperation and to emphasize my belief in the potential power of the churches of the world. So there will be no possibility of misinterpretation of my meaning. In the reference that I have here made to the churches, I will repeat that which I have so often said in person. Namely, that had it not been for the influence of the churches, no man would be safe in walking down the street. Men would be at each other's throat like wolves, and civilization would still be in the prehistoric age. My complaint is not against the work that the churches have done, but the work that they could have done through leadership that was based upon the principle of coordinated, cooperative effort, which would have carried civilization at least 1,000 years ahead of where it is today. It is not yet too late for such leadership. That you may more fully grasp the fundamental principle of cooperative effort, you are urged to go to the public library and read The Science of Power by Benjamin Kidd. Out of scores of volumes by some of the soundest thinkers of the world that I have read during the past 15 years, no single volume has given me such a full understanding of the possibilities of cooperative effort as has this book. In recommending that you read this book, it is not my purpose to endorse the book in its entirety, for it offers some theories with which I am not in accord. If you read it, do so with an open mind, and take from it only that which you feel you can use to advantage in achieving the object of your definite chief aim. The book will stimulate thought, which is the greatest service that any book can render. As a matter of fact, the chief object of this reading course on the law of success is to stimulate deliberate thought, particularly that brand of thought that is free from bias and prejudice and is seeking truth no matter where or how or when it may be found. During the World War, I was fortunate enough to listen to a great soldier's analysis of how to be a leader. This analysis was given to the student officers of the 2nd Training Camp at Fort Sheridan by Major C.A. Bach, a quiet, unassuming Army officer acting as an instructor. I have preserved a copy of this address because I believe it to be one of the finest lessons on leadership ever recorded. The wisdom of Major Bach's address is so vital to the businessman aspiring to leadership, or to the section boss, or to the stenographer, or to the foreman of the shop, or to the president of the works, that I have preserved it as a part of this reading course. It is my earnest hope that through the agency of this course, this remarkable dissertation on leadership will find its way into the hands of every employer and every worker, and every ambitious person who aspires to leadership in any walk of life. The principles upon which the address is based are as applicable to leadership in business and industry and finance as they are in the successful conduct of warfare. Major Bach spoke as follows: "In a short time each of you men will control the lives of a certain number of other men. You will have in your charge loyal but untrained citizens who look to you for instruction and guidance. Your word will be their law, your most casual remark will be remembered, your mannerisms will be aped, your clothing, your carriage, your vocabulary, your manner of command will be imitated. When you join your organization, you will find there a willing body of men who ask from you nothing more than the qualities that will command their respect, their loyalty, and their obedience. They are perfectly ready and eager to follow you so long as you can convince them that you have these qualities. When the time comes that they are satisfied you do not possess them, you might as well kiss yourself goodbye. Your usefulness in that organization is at an end. How remarkably true this is in all manner of leadership. From the standpoint of society, the world may be divided into leaders and followers. The professions have their leaders, the financial world has its leaders. In all this leadership it is difficult, if not impossible, to separate from the element of pure leadership that selfish element of personal gain or advantage to the individual, without which any leadership would lose its value. It is in military service only, where men freely sacrifice their lives for a faith, where men are willing to suffer and die for the right or the prevention of a wrong, that we can hope to realize leadership in its most exalted and disinterested sense. Therefore, when I say leadership, I mean military leadership. In a few days, the great mass of you men will receive commissions as officers. These commissions will not make you leaders, they will merely make you officers. They will place you in a position where you can become leaders if you possess the proper attributes. But you must make good, not so much with the men over you as with the men under you. Make excuses for the shortcomings of others if you wish, but hold yourself to a strict accountability if you would attain leadership in any undertaking. Men must and will follow into battle officers who are not leaders, but the driving power behind these men is not enthusiasm but discipline. They go with doubt and trembling that prompts the unspoken question, what will he do next? Such men obey the letter of their orders but no more. Of devotion to their commander, of exalted enthusiasm which scorns personal risk, of self-sacrifice to ensure his personal safety, they know nothing. Their legs carry them forward because their brain and their training tell them they must go. Their spirit does not go with them. Great results are not achieved by cold, passive, unresponsive soldiers. They don't go very far and they stop as soon as they can. Leadership not only demands but receives the willing, unhesitating, unfaltering obedience and loyalty of other men, and a devotion that will cause them, when the time comes, to follow their uncrowned king to hell and back again, if necessary. You will ask yourselves, of just what then does leadership consist? What must I do to become a leader? What are the attributes of leadership and how can I cultivate them? Leadership is a composite of a number of qualities, just as success is a composite of the 15 factors out of which this reading course was built. Among the most important I would list self-confidence, moral ascendancy, self-sacrifice, paternalism, fairness, initiative, decision, dignity, courage. Self-confidence results first from exact knowledge, second, the ability to impart that knowledge, and third, the feeling of superiority over others that naturally follows. All these give the officer poise. To lead, you must know. You may bluff all of your men some of the time, but you can't do it all the time. Men will not have confidence in an officer unless he knows his business, and he must know it from the ground up. The officer should know more about paperwork than his first sergeant and company clerk put together. He should know more about messing than his mess sergeant, more about diseases of the horse than his troop farrier. He should be at least as good a shot as any man in his company. If the officer does not know and demonstrates the fact that he does not know, it is entirely human for the soldier to say to himself, to hell with him. He doesn't know as much about this as I do, and calmly disregard the instructions received. There is no substitute for accurate knowledge. Become so well informed that men will hunt you up to ask questions. That your brother officers will say to one another, ask Smith, he knows. And not only should each officer know thoroughly the duties of his own grade, but he should study those of the 2 grades next above him. A twofold benefit attaches to this. He prepares himself for duties which may fall to his lot any time during battle. He further gains a broader viewpoint which enables him to appreciate the necessity for the issuance of orders and join more intelligently in their execution. Not only must the officer know, but he must be able to put what he knows into grammatical, interesting, forceful English. He must learn to stand on his feet and speak without embarrassment. I am told that in British training camps student officers are required to deliver 10-minute talks on any subject they choose. That is excellent practice. For to speak clearly one must think clearly, and clear, logical thinking expresses itself in definite, positive orders. While self-confidence is the result of knowing more than your men, moral ascendancy over them is based upon your belief that you are the better man. To gain and maintain this ascendancy, you must have self-control, physical vitality and endurance and moral force. You must have yourself so well in hand that, even though in battle you be scared stiff, you will never show fear. For if by so much as a hurried movement or a trembling of the hands, or a change of expression, or a hasty order hastily revoked, you indicate your mental condition, it will be reflected in your men in a far greater degree. In garrison or camp, many instances will arise to try your temper and wreck the sweetness of your disposition. If at such times you fly off the handle, you have no business to be in charge of men. For men in anger say and do things that they almost invariably regret afterward. An officer should never apologize to his men. Also, an officer should never be guilty of an act for which his sense of justice tells him he should apologize. Another element in gaining moral ascendancy lies in the possession of enough physical vitality and endurance to withstand the hardships to which you and your men are subjected, and a dauntless spirit that enables you not only to accept them cheerfully, but to minimize their magnitude. Make light of your troubles, belittle your trials, and you will help vitally to build up within your organization an esprit whose value in time of stress cannot be measured. Moral force is the third element in gaining moral ascendancy. To exert moral force, you must live clean. You must have sufficient brain power to see the right and the will to do right. Be an example to your men. An officer can be a power for good or a power for evil. Don't preach to them, that will be worse than useless. Live the kind of life you would have them lead, and you will be surprised to see the number that will imitate you. A loud-mouthed, profane captain who is careless of his personal appearance will have a loud-mouthed, profane, dirty company. Remember what I tell you, your company will be the reflection of yourself. If you have a rotten company, it will be because you are a rotten captain. Self-sacrifice is essential to leadership. You will give all the time. You will give of yourself physically. For the longest hours, the hardest work and the greatest responsibility are the lot of the captain. He is the first man up in the morning and the last man in at night. He works while others sleep. You will give of yourself mentally, in sympathy and appreciation for the troubles of men in your charge. This one's mother has died, and that one has lost all his savings in a bank failure. They may desire help, but more than anything else they desire sympathy. Don't make the mistake of turning such men down with the statement that you have troubles of your own, for every time you do that you knock a stone out of the foundation of your house. Your men are your foundation, and your house of leadership will tumble about your ears unless it rests securely upon them. Finally, you will give of your own slender financial resources. You will frequently spend your own money to conserve the health and well-being of your men or to assist them when in trouble. Generally, you get your money back. Very frequently, you must charge it off to profit and loss. Even so, it is worth the cost. When I say that paternalism is essential to leadership, I use the term in its better sense. I do not now refer to that form of paternalism which robs men of initiative, self-reliance, and self-respect. I refer to the paternalism that manifests itself in a watchful care for the comfort and welfare of those in your charge. Soldiers are much like children. You must see that they have shelter, food, and clothing, the best that your utmost efforts can provide. You must see that they have food to eat before you think of your own, that they have each as good a bed as can be provided before you consider where you will sleep. You must be far more solicitous of their comfort than of your own. You must look after their health. You must conserve their strength by not demanding needless exertion or useless labor. And by doing all these things, you are breathing life into what would be otherwise a mere machine. You are creating a soul in your organization that will make the mass respond to you as though it were one man, and that is esprit. No accurate thinker will judge another person by that which the other person's enemies say about him. And when your organization has this esprit, you will wake up some morning and discover that the tables have been turned, that instead of your constantly looking out for them, they have, without even a hint from you, taken up the task of looking out for you. You will find that a detail is always there to see that your tent, if you have one, is promptly pitched, that the most and the cleanest bedding is brought to your tent, that from some mysterious source 2 eggs have been added to your supper when no one else has any, that an extra man is helping your men give your horse a super grooming, that your wishes are anticipated, that every man is Johnny on the spot, and then you have arrived. You cannot treat all men alike. A punishment that would be dismissed by one man with a shrug of the shoulders is mental anguish for another. A company commander who, for a given offense, has a standard punishment that applies to all is either too indolent or too stupid to study the personality of his men. In his case, justice is certainly blind. Study your men as carefully as a surgeon studies a difficult case, and when you are sure of your diagnosis, apply the remedy. And remember that you apply the remedy to effect a cure, not merely to see the victim squirm. It may be necessary to cut deep, but when you are satisfied as to your diagnosis, don't be diverted from your purpose by any false sympathy for the patient. Hand in hand with fairness in awarding punishment walks fairness in giving credit. Everybody hates a human hog. When one of your men has accomplished an especially creditable piece of work, see that he gets the proper reward. Turn heaven and earth upside down to get it for him. Don't try to take it away from him and hog it for yourself. You may do this and get away with it, but you have lost the respect and loyalty of your men. Sooner or later, your brother officers will hear of it and shun you like a leper. In war there is glory enough for all. Give the man under you his due. The man who always takes and never gives is not a leader. He is a parasite. There is another kind of fairness, that which will prevent an officer from abusing the privileges of his rank. When you exact respect from soldiers, be sure you treat them with equal respect. Build up their manhood and self-respect. Don't try to pull it down. For an officer to be overbearing and insulting in the treatment of enlisted men is the act of a coward. He ties the man to a tree with the ropes of discipline and then strikes him in the face, knowing full well that the man cannot strike back. Consideration, courtesy, and respect from officers toward enlisted men are not incompatible with discipline. They are parts of our discipline. Without initiative and decision, no man can expect to lead. In maneuvers you will frequently see, when an emergency arises, certain men calmly give instant orders which later, on analysis, prove to be, if not exactly the right thing, very nearly the right thing to have done. You will see other men in emergency become badly rattled. Their brains refuse to work, or they give a hasty order, revoke it, give another, revoke that. In short, show every indication of being in a blue funk. Regarding the first man, you may say, that man is a genius. He hasn't had time to reason this thing out. He acts intuitively. Forget it. Genius is merely the capacity for taking infinite pains. The man who was ready is the man who has prepared himself. He has studied beforehand the possible situations that might arise. He has made tentative plans covering such situations. When he is confronted by the emergency, he is ready to meet it. He must have sufficient mental alertness to appreciate the problem that confronts him and the power of quick reasoning to determine what changes are necessary in his already formulated plan. He must also have the decision to order the execution and stick to his orders. Any reasonable order in an emergency is better than no order. The situation is there. Meet it. It is better to do something and do the wrong thing than to hesitate, hunt around for the right thing to do, and wind up by doing nothing at all. And having decided on a line of action, stick to it. Don't vacillate. Men have no confidence in an officer who doesn't know his own mind. Occasionally you will be called upon to meet a situation which no reasonable human being could anticipate. If you have prepared yourself to meet other emergencies which you could anticipate, the mental training you have thereby gained will enable you to act promptly and with calmness. You must frequently act without orders from higher authority. Time will not permit you to wait for them. Here again enters the importance of studying the work of officers above you. If you have a comprehensive grasp of the entire situation and can form an idea of the general plan of your superiors, that in your previous emergency training will enable you to determine that the responsibility is yours and to issue the necessary orders without delay. The element of personal dignity is important in military leadership. Be the friend of your men, but do not become their intimate. Your men should stand in awe of you, not fear. If your men presume to become familiar, it is your fault and not theirs. Your actions have encouraged them to do so. And above all things, don't cheapen yourself by courting their friendship or currying their favor. They will despise you for it. If you are worthy of their loyalty and respect and devotion, they will surely give all these without asking. If you are not, nothing that you can do will win them. It is exceedingly difficult for an officer to be dignified while wearing a dirty, spotted uniform and a 3 days' stubble of whiskers on his face. Such a man lacks self-respect, and self-respect is an essential of dignity. There may be occasions when your work entails dirty clothes and an unshaved face. Your men all look that way. At such times, there is ample reason for your appearance. In fact, it would be a mistake to look too clean. They would think that you were not doing your share. But as soon as this unusual occasion has passed, set an example for personal neatness. And then I would mention courage. Moral courage you need as well as mental courage. That kind of moral courage which enables you to adhere without faltering to a determined course of action, which your judgment has indicated, is the one best suited to secure the desired results. You will find many times, especially in action, that after having issued your orders to do a certain thing, you will be beset by misgivings and doubts. You will see, or think you see, other and better means for accomplishing the object sought. You will be strongly tempted to change your orders. Don't do it until it is clearly manifested that your first orders were radically wrong. For if you do, you will be again worried by doubts as to the efficacy of your second orders. Every time you change your orders without obvious reason, you weaken your authority and impair the confidence of your men. Have the moral courage to stand by your order and see it through. Moral courage further demands that you assume the responsibility for your own acts. If your subordinates have loyally carried out your orders and the movement you directed is a failure, the failure is yours, not theirs. Yours would have been the honor had it been successful. Take the blame if it results in disaster. Don't try to shift it to a subordinate and make him the goat. That is a cowardly act. Furthermore, you will need moral courage to determine the fate of those under you. You will frequently be called upon for recommendations for promotion or demotion of officers and non-commissioned officers in your immediate command. Keep clearly in mind your personal integrity and the duty you owe your country. Do not let yourself be deflected from a strict sense of justice by feelings of personal friendship. If your own brother is your sect, there is something wrong about the man whose wife and children do not greet him affectionately on his homecoming. And lieutenant, and you find him unfit to hold his commission, eliminate him. If you don't, your lack of moral courage may result in the loss of valuable lives. If, on the other hand, you are called upon for a recommendation concerning a man whom, for personal reasons, you thoroughly dislike, do not fail to do him full justice. Remember that your aim is the general good, not the satisfaction of an individual grudge. I am taking it for granted that you have physical courage. I need not tell you how necessary that is. Courage is more than bravery. Bravery is fearlessness, the absence of fear. The merest dolt may be brave because he lacks the mentality to appreciate his danger. He doesn't know enough to be afraid. Courage, however, is that firmness of spirit, that moral backbone which, while fully appreciating the danger involved, nevertheless goes on with the undertaking. Bravery is physical, courage is mental and moral. You may be cold all over, your hands may tremble, your legs may quake, your knees be ready to give way, that is fear. If nevertheless you go forward, if in spite of this physical defection you continue to lead your men against the enemy, you have courage. The physical manifestations of fear will pass away. You may never experience them but once. They are the buck fever of the hunter who tries to shoot his first deer. You must not give way to them. A number of years ago, while taking a course in demolitions, the class of which I was a member was handling dynamite. The instructor said, regarding its manipulation, "I must caution you gentlemen to be careful in the use of these explosives. One man has but one accident, and so I would caution you. If you give way to fear, that will doubtless beset you in your first action. If you show the white feather, if you let your men go forward while you hunt a shell crater, you will never again have the opportunity of leading those men. Use judgment in calling on your men for displays of physical courage or bravery. Don't ask any man to go where you would not go yourself. If your common sense tells you that the place is too dangerous for you to venture into, then it is too dangerous for him. You know his life is as valuable to him as yours is to you. Occasionally your men must be exposed to danger which you cannot share. A message must be taken across a fire-swept zone. You call for volunteers. If your men know you and know that you are right, you will never lack volunteers, for they will know your heart is in your work, that you are giving your country the best you have, that you would willingly carry the message yourself if you could. Your example and enthusiasm will have inspired them. And lastly, if you aspire to leadership, I would urge you to study men, get under their skins and find out what is inside. Some men are quite different from what they appear to be on the surface. Determine the workings of their mind. Much of General Robert E. Lee's success as a leader may be ascribed to his ability as a psychologist. He knew most of his opponents from West Point days, knew the workings of their minds, and he believed that they would do certain things under certain circumstances. In nearly every case, he was able to anticipate their movements and block the execution. You cannot know your opponent in this war in the same way, but you can know your own men. You can study each to determine wherein lies his strength and his weakness, which man can be relied upon to the last gasp and which cannot. Know your men, know your business, know yourself. In all literature you will not find a better description of leadership than this. Apply it to yourself, or to your business, or to your profession, or to the place where you are employed, and you will observe how well it serves as your guide. Major Bach's address is one that might well be delivered to every boy and girl who graduates in high school. It might well be delivered to every college graduate. It might well become the book of rules for every man who is placed in a position of leadership over other men, no matter in what calling, business, or profession. In Lesson 2, you learn the value of a definite chief aim. Let it be here emphasized that your aim must be active and not passive. A definite aim will never be anything else but a mere wish unless you become a person of initiative and aggressively and persistently pursue that aim until it has been fulfilled. You can get nowhere without persistence, a fact which cannot be too often repeated. The difference between persistence and lack of it is the same as the difference between wishing for a thing and positively determining to get it. To become a person of initiative, you must form the habit of aggressively and persistently following the object of your definite chief aim until you acquire it, whether this requires 1 year or 20 years. You might as well have no definite chief aim as to have such an aim without continuous effort to achieve it. You are not making the most of this course if you do not take some step each day that brings you nearer realization of your definite chief aim. Do not fool yourself or permit yourself to be misled to believe that the object of your definite chief aim will matter alive if you only wait. The materialization will come through your own determination, backed by your own carefully laid plans and your own initiative in putting those plans into action, or it will not come at all. One of the major requisites for leadership is the power of quick and firm decision. Analysis of more than 16,000 people disclosed the fact that leaders are always men of ready decision, even in matters of small importance, while the follower is never a person of quick decision. This is worth remembering. The follower, in whatever walk of life you find him, is a man who seldom knows what he wants. He vacillates, procrastinates, and actually refuses to reach a decision, even in matters of the smallest importance, unless a leader induces him to do so. To know that the majority of people cannot and will not reach decisions quickly, if at all, is of great help to the leader who knows what he wants and has a plan for getting it. Here it will be observed how closely allied are the two laws covered by Lesson 2 and this lesson. The leader not only works with a definite chief aim, but he has a very definite plan for attaining the object of that aim. It will be seen also that the law of self-confidence becomes an important part of the working equipment of the leader. The chief reason why the follower does not reach decisions is that he lacks the self-confidence to do so. Every leader makes use of the law of a definite purpose, the law of self-confidence, and the law of initiative and leadership. And if he is an outstanding, successful leader, he makes use also of the laws of imagination, enthusiasm, self-control, pleasing personality, accurate thinking, concentration, and tolerance. Without the combined use of all these laws, no one may become a really great leader. Omission of a single one of these laws lessens the power of the leader proportionately. A salesman for the La Salle Extension University called on a real estate dealer in a small western town for the purpose of trying to sell the real estate man a course in salesmanship and business management. When the salesman arrived at the prospective student's office, he found the gentleman pecking out a letter by the two-finger method on an antiquated typewriter. The salesman introduced himself, then proceeded to state his business and describe the course he had come to sell. The real estate man listened with apparent interest. After the sales talk had been completed, the salesman hesitated, waiting for some signs of yes or no from his prospective client. Thinking that perhaps he had not made the sales talk quite strong enough, he briefly went over the merits of the course. No man may become an accurate thinker until he learns how to separate mere gossip and information from facts. He was selling a second time. Still there was no response from the prospective student. The salesman then asked the direct question, "You want this course, do you not?" In a slow, drawling tone of voice, the real estate man replied, "Well, I hardly know whether I do or not." No doubt he was telling the truth, because he was one of the millions of men who find it hard to reach decisions. Being an able judge of human nature, the salesman then arose, put on his hat, placed his literature back in his briefcase, and made ready to leave. Then he resorted to tactics which were somewhat drastic, and took the real estate man by surprise with this startling statement. "I am going to take it upon myself to say something to you that you will not like, but it may be of help to you. Take a look at this office in which you work. The floor is dirty, the walls are dusty, the typewriter you are using looks as if it might be the one Mr. Noah used in the ark during the big flood. Your pants are bagged at the knees. Your collar is dirty, your face is unshaved, and you have a look in your eyes that tells me you are defeated. Please go ahead and get mad. That's just what I want you to do, because it may shock you into doing some thinking that will be helpful to you and to those who are dependent upon you. I can see in my imagination the home in which you live. several little children, none too well dressed and perhaps none too well fed, a mother whose dress is 3 seasons out of style, whose eyes carry the same look of defeat that yours do. This little woman whom you married has stuck by you, but you have not made good in life as she had hoped when you were first married that you would. Please remember that I am not now talking to a prospective student, because I would not sell you this course at this particular moment if you offered to pay cash in advance, because if I did you would not have the initiative to complete it, and we want no failures on our student list. The talk I am now giving you will make it impossible, perhaps, for me ever to sell you anything, but it is going to do something for you that has never been done before, providing it makes you think. Now I will tell you in a very few words exactly why you are defeated, why you are pecking out letters on an old typewriter in an old dirty office in a little town. It is because you do not have the power to reach a decision. All your life you have been forming the habit of dodging the responsibility of reaching decisions, until you have come now to where it is well nigh impossible for you to do so. If you had told me that you wanted the course or that you did not want it, I could have sympathized with you, because I would have known that lack of funds was what caused you to hesitate, but what did you say? Why, you admitted you did not know whether you wanted it or not. If you will think over what I have said, I am sure you will acknowledge that it has become a habit with you to dodge the responsibility of reaching clear-cut decisions on practically all matters that affect you. The real estate man sat glued in his chair, with his underjaw dropped, his eyes bulged in astonishment, but he made no attempt to answer the biting indictment. The salesman said goodbye and started for the door. After he had closed the door behind him, he again opened it, walked back in, with a smile on his face, took his seat in front of the astonished real estate man, and explained his conduct in this way. I do not blame you at all if you feel hurt at my remarks. In fact, I sort of hope that you have been offended, but now let me say this, man to man, that I think you have intelligence and I am sure you have ability, but you have fallen into a habit that has whipped you. No man is ever down and out until he is under the sod. You may be temporarily down, but you can get up again, and I am just sportsman enough to give you my hand and offer you a lift, if you will accept my apologies for what I have said. You do not belong in this town. You would starve to death in the real estate business in this place, even if you were a leader in your field. Get yourself a new suit of clothes, even if you have to borrow the money with which to do it. Then go over to St. Louis with me, and I will introduce you to a real estate man who will give you a chance to earn some money, and at the same time teach you some of the important things about this line of work that you can capitalize later on. If you haven't enough credit to get the clothes you need, I will stand good for you at a store in St. Louis where I have a charge account. I am in earnest, and my offer to help you is based upon the highest motive that can actuate a human being. I am successful in my own field, but I have not always been so. I went through just what you are now going through, but the important thing is that I went through it and got it over with, just as you are going to do if you will follow my advice. Will you come with me? The real estate man started to arise, but his legs wobbled and he sank back into his chair. Despite the fact that he was a great big fellow, with rather pronounced manly qualities known as the He-Man type, his emotions got the better of him and he actually wept. He made a second attempt and got on his feet, shook hands with the salesman, thanked him for his kindness, and said he was going to follow the advice, but he would do so in his own way. Calling for an application blank, he signed for the course on salesmanship and business management, made the first payment in nickels and dimes, and told the salesman he would hear from him again. 3 years later, this real estate man had an organization of 60 salesmen, and one of the most successful real estate businesses in the city of St. Louis. The author of this course, who was advertising manager of the La Salle Extension University at the time this incident happened, has been in this real estate man's office many times and has observed him over a period of more than 15 years. He is an entirely different man from the person interviewed by the La Salle salesman over 15 years ago, and the thing that made him different is the same that will make you different. It is the power of decision which is so essential to leadership. This real estate man is now a leader in the real estate field. He is directing the efforts of other salesmen and helping them to become more efficient. This one change in his philosophy has turned temporary defeat into success. Every new salesman who goes to work for this man is called into his private office before he is employed and told the story of his own transformation, word for word, just as it occurred when the La Salle salesman first met him in his shabby little real estate office. Some 18 years ago, the author of this course made his first trip to the little town of Lumberport, W.Va. At that time, the only means of transportation leading from Clarksburg, the largest nearby center, to Lumberport was the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, and an interurban electric line which ran within 3 miles of the town. One could walk the 3 miles if he chose. Upon arrival at Clarksburg, I found that the only train going to Lumberport in the forenoon had already gone, and not wishing to wait for the later afternoon train, I made the trip by trolley with the intention of walking the 3 miles. On the way down, the rain began to pour, and those 3 miles had to be navigated on foot through deep yellow mud. When I arrived at Lumberport, my shoes and pants were muddy, and my disposition was none the better for the experience. The first person I met was V.L. Horner, whose mastery of the 15 laws of success is the equivalent of an insurance policy against failure. Samuel Gompers, then cashier of the Lumberport Bank. In a rather loud tone of voice, I asked of him, "Why do you not get that trolley line extended from the junction over to Lumberport so your friends can get in and out of town without drowning in mud? Did you see a river with high banks at the edge of the town as you came in?" he asked. I replied that I had seen it. "Well," he continued, "that's the reason we have no street cars running into town. The cost of a bridge would be about $100,000, and that is more than the company owning the trolley line is willing to invest. We have been trying for 10 years to get them to build a line into town." "Trying," I exploded. "How hard have you tried? We have offered them every inducement we could afford, such as free right-of-way from the junction into the town and free use of the streets, but that bridge is the stumbling block. They simply will not stand the expense, claim they cannot afford such an expense for the small amount of revenue they would receive from the 3-mile extension." Then the law of success philosophy began to come to my rescue. I asked Mr. Horner if he would take a walk over to the river with me, that we might look at the spot that was causing so much inconvenience. He said he would be glad to do so. When we got to the river, I began to take inventory of everything in sight. I observed that the Baltimore and Ohio railroad tracks ran up and down the river banks on both sides of the river, that the county road crossed the river on a rickety wooden bridge, both approaches to which were over several strands of railroad track, as the railroad company had its switching yards at that point. While we were standing there, a freight train blocked the crossing, and several teams stopped on both sides of the train, waiting for an opportunity to get through. The train kept the road blocked for about 25 minutes. With this combination of circumstances in mind, it required but little imagination to see that 3 different parties were, or could be interested in the building of the bridge, such as would be needed to carry the weight of a street car. It was obvious that the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Company would be interested in such a bridge, because that would remove the county road from their switching tracks and save them a possible accident on the crossing, to say nothing of much loss of time and expense in cutting trains to allow teams to pass. It was also obvious that the county commissioners would be interested in the bridge, because it would raise the county road to a better level and make it more serviceable to the public. And of course the street railway company was interested in the bridge, but it did not wish to pay the entire cost. All these facts passed through my mind as I stood there and watched the freight train being cut for the traffic to pass through. A definite chief aim took place in my mind, also a definite plan for its attainment. The next day I got together a committee of townspeople, consisting of the mayor, councilmen, and some leading citizens, and called on the division superintendent of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Company at Grafton. We convinced him that it was worth 1/3 of the cost of the bridge to get the county road off his company's tracks. Next we went to the county commissioners and found them to be quite enthusiastic over the possibility of getting a new bridge by paying for only 1/3 of it. They promised to pay their 1/3 providing we could arrange for the other 2/3. We then went to the president of the traction company that owned the trolley line at Fairmont and laid before him an offer to donate all the rights of way and pay for 2/3 of the cost of the bridge, providing he would begin building the line into town promptly. We found him receptive also. 3 weeks later, a contract had been signed between the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Company, the Monongahela Valley Traction Company, and the county commissioners of Harrison County, providing for the construction of the bridge, 1/3 of its cost to be paid by each. 2 months later, the right-of-way was being graded, and the bridge was underway, and 3 months after that, street cars were running into Lumberport on regular schedule. This incident meant much to the town of Lumberport because it provided transportation that enabled people to get in and out of the town without undue effort. It also meant a great deal to me because it served to introduce me as one who got things done. 2 very definite advantages resulted from this transaction. The chief counsel for the traction company gave me a position as his assistant, and later on it was the means of an introduction which led to my appointment as the advertising manager of the La Salle Extension University. Lumberport WVA was then and still is a small town, and Chicago was a large city and located a considerable distance away, but news of initiative and leadership has a way of taking on wings and traveling. 4 of the 15 laws of success were combined in the transaction described, namely, a definite chief aim, self-confidence, imagination, and initiative and leadership. The law of doing more than paid for also entered, somewhat, into the transaction, because I was not offered anything and in fact did not expect pay for what I did. To be perfectly frank, I appointed myself to the job of getting the bridge built more as a sort of challenge to those who said it could not be done than I did with the expectation of getting paid for it. By my attitude, I rather intimated to Mr. Horner that I could get the job done, and he was not slow to snap me up and put me to the test. It may be helpful to call attention here to the part which imagination played in this transaction. For 10 years, the townspeople of Lumberport had been trying to get a streetcar line built into town. It must not be concluded that the town was without men of ability, because that would be inaccurate. In fact, there were many men of ability in the town, but they had been making the mistake which is so commonly made by us all, of trying to solve their problem through one single source, whereas there were actually 3 sources of solution available to them. $100,000 was too much for one company to assume for the construction of a bridge, but when the cost was distributed between 3 interested parties, the amount to be borne by each was more reasonable. The question might be asked, why did not some of the local townsmen think of this 3-way solution? In the first place, they were so close to their problem that they failed to take a perspective, bird's-eye view of it, which would have suggested the solution. This also is a common mistake, and one that is always avoided by great leaders. In the second place, these townspeople had never before coordinated their efforts, or worked as an organized group with the sole purpose in mind of finding a way to get a streetcar line built into town. This also is another common error made by men in all walks of life, that of failure to work in unison, in a thorough spirit of cooperation. I, being an outsider, had less difficulty in getting cooperative action than one of their own group might have had. Too often there is a spirit of selfishness in small communities which prompts each individual to think that his ideas should prevail. It is an important part of the leader's responsibility to induce people to subordinate their own ideas and interests for the good of the whole, and this applies to matters of a civic, business, social, political, financial, or industrial nature. Success, no matter what may be one's conception of that term, is nearly always a question of one's ability to get others to subordinate their own individualities and follow a leader. The leader who has the personality and the imagination to induce his time is the mighty hand that rocks the eternal cradle of progress and nurses struggling humanity through that period when man needs protection against his own ignorance. Followers to accept his plans and carry them out faithfully is always an able leader. The next lesson on imagination will take you still further into the art of tactful leadership. In fact, leadership and imagination are so closely allied and so essential for success that one cannot be successfully applied without the other. Initiative is the moving force that pushes the leader ahead, but imagination is the guiding spirit that tells him which way to go. Imagination enabled the author of this course to analyze the Lumberport Bridge problem, break it up into its 3 component parts, and assemble these parts in a practical working plan. Nearly every problem may be so broken up into parts which are more easily managed as parts than they are when assembled as a whole. Perhaps one of the most important advantages of imagination is that it enables one to separate all problems into their component parts and to reassemble them in more favorable combinations. It has been said that all battles in warfare are won or lost, not on the firing line, after the battle begins, but back of the lines, through the sound strategy, or the lack of it, used by the generals who plan the battles. What is true of warfare is equally true in business and in most other problems which confront us throughout life. We win or lose according to the nature of the plans we build and carry out, a fact which serves to emphasize the value of the laws of initiative and leadership, imagination, self-confidence, and a definite chief aim. With the intelligent use of these 4 laws, one may build plans, for any purpose whatsoever, which cannot be defeated by any person or group of persons who do not employ or understand these laws. There is no escape from the truth here stated. Organized effort is effort which is directed according to a plan that was conceived with the aid of imagination, guided by a definite chief aim, and given momentum with initiative and self-confidence. These 4 laws blend into one and become a power in the hands of a leader, Without their aid, effective leadership is impossible. You are now ready for the lesson on imagination. Read that lesson with the thought in mind of all that has been here stated, and it will take on a deeper meaning. Life is not a goblet to be drained, it is a measure to be filled. Hadley. Intolerance. And after the lesson, visit with the author. If you must give expression to prejudice and hatred and intolerance, do not speak it, but write it. Write it in the sands near the water's edge. When the dawn of intelligence shall spread over the eastern horizon of human progress, and ignorance and superstition shall have left their last footprints on the sands of time, it will be recorded in the last chapter of the book of man's crimes that his most grievous sin was that of intolerance. The bitterest intolerance grows out of religious, racial, and economic prejudices and differences of opinion. How long, O God, until we poor mortals will understand the folly of trying to destroy one another because we are of different religious beliefs and racial tendencies? Our allotted time on this earth is but a fleeting moment. Like a candle, we are lighted, shine for a moment, and flicker out. Why can we not learn to so live during this brief earthly visit that when the great caravan called death draws up and announces this visit completed, we will be ready to fold our tents and silently follow out into the great unknown without fear and trembling? I am hoping that I will find no Jews or Gentiles, Catholics or Protestants, Germans, Englishmen or Frenchmen when I shall have crossed the bar to the other side. I am hoping that I will find there only human souls, brothers and sisters all, unmarked by race, creed, or color, for I shall want to be done with intolerance so I may rest in peace throughout eternity. You will see at the top of the previous page a picture which describes the futility of combat. The two male deer have engaged in a fight to the finish, each believing that he will be the winner. Off at the side, the female awaits the victor, little dreaming that tomorrow the bones of both combatants will be bleaching in the sun. Poor foolish animals, someone will say, perhaps, but not very different from the man family. Man engages his brothers in mortal combat because of competition. The three major forms of competition are sex, economic, and religious in nature. 20 years ago, a great educational institution was doing a thriving business and rendering a worthy service to thousands of students. The two owners of the school married two beautiful and talented young women who were especially accomplished in the art of piano playing. The two wives became involved in an argument as to which one was the more accomplished in this art. The disagreement was taken up by each of the husbands. They became bitter enemies. Now the bones of that once prosperous school lie bleaching in the sun. The two bucks shown in the picture above locked horns over the attention of the doe. The two man bucks locked horns over the selfsame impulse. In one of the great industrial plants, two young foremen locked horns because one received a promotion which the other believed he should have had. For more than 5 years, the silent undertow of hatred and intolerance showed itself. The men under each of the foremen became inoculated with the spirit of dislike which they saw cropping out in their superiors. Slowly, the spirit of retaliation began to spread over the entire plant. The men became divided into little cliques. Production began to fall off. Then came financial difficulty and finally bankruptcy for the company. Now the bones of a once prosperous business lie bleaching in the sun, and the two foremen and several thousand others were compelled to start all over again in another field. Down in the mountains of West Virginia lived two peaceful families of mountain folk, the Hatfields and the McCoys. They had been friendly neighbors for 3 generations. A razorback pig belonging to the McCoy family crawled through the fence into the Hatfield family's cornfield. The Hatfields turned their hound loose on the pig. The McCoys retaliated by killing the dog. Then began a feud that has lasted for 3 generations and cost many lives of the Hatfields and McCoys. In a fashionable suburb of Philadelphia, certain gentlemen of wealth have built their homes. In front of each house the word intolerance is written. One man builds a high steel fence in front of his house. The neighbor next to him, not to be outdone, builds a fence twice as high. Another buys a new motor car, and the man next door goes him one better by purchasing 2 new cars. One remodels his house, adding a colonial-style porch. The man next door adds a new porch and a Spanish-style garage for good measure. The big mansion on top of the hill gives a reception which brings a long line of motor cars filled with people who have nothing in particular in common with the host. Then follows a series of receptions, all down the Gold Coast line, each trying to outshine all the others. The Mr., but they don't call him that in fashionable neighborhoods, goes to business in the back seat of a Rolls-Royce that is managed by a chauffeur and a footman. Why does he go to business? To make money, of course. Why does he want more money when he already has millions of dollars, so he can keep on outdoing his wealthy neighbors? Poverty has some advantages. It never drives those who are poverty-stricken to lock horns in the attempt to out-poverty their neighbors. Wherever you see men with their horns locked in conflict, you may trace the cause of the combat to one of the three causes of intolerance: religious difference of opinion, economic competition, or sex competition. The next time you observe two men engaged in any sort of hostility toward each other, just close your eyes and think for a moment, and you may see them, in their transformed nature, very much resembling the male deer shown in the picture above. Off at one side you may see the object of the combat, a pile of gold, a religious emblem, or a female or females. Remember, the purpose of this essay is to tell some of the truth about human nature, with the object of causing its readers to think. Its writer seeks no glory or praise, and likely he will receive neither in connection with this particular subject. Andrew Carnegie and Henry C. Frick did more than any other two men to establish the steel industry. Both made millions of dollars for themselves. Came the day when economic intolerance sprang up between them. To show his contempt for Frick, Carnegie built a tall skyscraper and named it the Carnegie Building. Frick retaliated by erecting a much taller building alongside of the Carnegie Building, naming it the Frick Building. These two gentlemen locked horns in a fight to the finish. Carnegie lost his mind, and perhaps more, for all we of this world know. What Frick lost is known only to himself and the keeper of the great records. In memory, their bones lie bleaching in the sun of posterity. The steel men of today are managing things differently. Instead of locking horns, they now interlock directorates, with the result that each is practically a solidified, strong unit of the whole industry. The steel men of today understand the difference between the meaning of the words competition and cooperation, a difference which the remainder of us would do well to understand also. In England, the men who own the mines and those who run the labor unions locked horns. Had not the cooler heads unlocked those horns, the bones of the British Empire, including both the owners of industry and the labor unions, should soon have lain bleaching in the sun. 1 year of open combat between the unions and the owners of industry in Great Britain would have meant annihilation of the British Empire. The other nations of the world would have grabbed all the economic machinery now controlled by Britain. Let the leaders of American industry and unionism not forget, 15 factors enter into the attainment of success. One of these is tolerance. The other 14 are mentioned many times in this series of lessons. Intolerance binds man's legs with the shackles of ignorance and covers his eyes with the scales of fear and superstition. Intolerance closes the book of knowledge and writes on the cover, "Open not this book again. The last word has been herein written. It is not your duty to be tolerant, it is your privilege." Remember, as you read this article, that sowing the seed of intolerance is the sole and exclusive business of some men. All wars and all strikes and all other forms of human suffering bring profit to SOME. If this were not true, there would be no wars or strikes or other similar forms of hostility. In the United States today, there is a well-organized system of propaganda, the object of which is to stir up strife and hostility between the owners of industries and those who work in those industries. Take another look at the picture at the beginning of this article, and you may see what will happen to all who lock horns in labor disagreements. And remember that it is always the bones of the workers, and not those of the leaders of either the unions or the industries, that lie bleaching in the sun after the fight is over. When you feel yourself preparing to lock horns with someone, remember that it will be more profitable if you lock hands instead. A warm, hearty handshake leaves no bones bleaching in the sun. Love is the only bow on life's dark cloud. It is the morning and the evening star. It shines upon the cradle of the babe and sheds its radiance upon the quiet tomb. It is the mother of art, inspirer of poet, patriot, and philosopher. It is the air and light of every heart, builder of every home, kindler of every fire on every hearth. It was the first to dream of immortality. It fills the world with melody, for music is the voice of love. Love is the magician, the enchanter that changes worthless things to joy, and makes right royal kings and queens of common clay. It is the perfume of the wondrous flower, the heart, and without that sacred passion, that divine swoon, we are less than beasts, but with it, earth is heaven and we are gods in Jersall. Cultivate love for your fellow man, and you will no longer want to lock horns with him in futile combat. Love makes every man his brother's keeper. Love indeed is light from heaven, a spark of that immortal fire with angels shared by Allah given, to lift from earth our low desire. Devotion wafts the mind above, but heaven itself descends in love. A feeling from the Godhead caught to wean from self each sordid thought, a ray of him who formed the whole, a glory circling round the soul. Byron, no one has given you an opportunity. Has it ever occurred to you to create opportunity for yourself? In 16 Lessons teaching, for the first time in the history of the world, the true philosophy upon which all personal success is built. BY Lesson 6 Imagination, I call that man idle who might be better employed. Socrates Lesson 6 Imagination, you can do it if you believe you can. Imagination is the workshop of the human mind wherein old ideas and established facts may be reassembled into new combinations and put to new uses. The modern dictionary defines imagination as follows: the act of constructive intellect in grouping the materials of knowledge or thought into new, original and rational systems, the constructive or creative faculty. Embracing poetic, artistic, philosophically, scientific and ethical imagination. The picturing power of the mind, the formation of mental images, pictures, or mental representation of objects or ideas, particularly of objects of sense perception and of mathematical reasoning. Also the reproduction and combination, usually with more or less irrational or abnormal modification, of the images or ideas of memory or recalled facts of experience. Imagination has been called the creative power of the soul. But this is somewhat abstract and goes more deeply into the meaning than is necessary from the viewpoint of a student of this course who wishes to use the course only as a means of attaining material or monetary advantages in life. If you have mastered and thoroughly understood the preceding lessons of this reading course, you know that the materials out of which you built your definite chief aim were assembled and combined in your imagination. You also know that self-confidence and initiative and leadership must be created in your imagination before they can become a reality. For it is in the workshop of your imagination that you will put the principle of autosuggestion into operation in creating these necessary qualities. This lesson on imagination might be called the hub of this reading course, because every lesson of the course leads to this lesson and makes use of the principle upon which it is based, just as all the telephone wires lead to the exchange office for their source of power. You will never have a definite purpose in life, you will never have self-confidence, you will never have initiative and leadership unless you first create these qualities in your imagination and see yourself in possession of them. Just as the oak tree develops from the germ that lies in the acorn, and the bird develops from the germ that lies asleep in the egg, so will your material achievements grow out of the organized plans that you create in your imagination. First comes the thought, then organization of that thought into ideas and plans, then transformation of those plans into reality. The beginning, as you will observe, is in your imagination. The imagination is both interpretative and creative in nature. It can examine facts, concepts, and ideas, and it can create new combinations and plans out of these. Through its interpretative capacity, the imagination has one power not generally attributed to it, namely, the power to register vibrations and thought waves that are put into motion from outside sources, just as the radio receiving apparatus picks up the vibrations of sound. The principle through which this interpretative capacity of the imagination functions is called telepathy, the communication of thought from one mind to another, at long or short distances, without the aid of physical or mechanical appliances, in the manner explained in the introductory lesson of this course. Telepathy is an important factor to a student who is preparing to make effective use of imagination, for the reason that this telepathic capacity of the imagination is constantly picking up thought waves and vibrations of every description. So-called snap judgment and hunches, which prompt one to form an opinion or decide upon a course of action that is not in harmony with logic and reason, are usually the result of stray thought waves that have registered in the imagination. The recently developed radio apparatus has enabled us to understand that the elements of the ether are so sensitive and alive that all manner of sound waves are constantly flying here and there with lightning-like speed. You have only to understand the modern radio outfit to understand, also, the principle of telepathy. So well has this principle been established through psychological research that we have abundance of proof that two minds which are properly attuned and in harmony with each other may send and receive thought at long distances without the aid of mechanical apparatus of any sort. Rarely have two minds become so well attuned that unbroken chains of thought could be registered in this manner, but there is evidence sufficient to establish the fact that parts of organized thought have been picked up. That you may understand how closely interwoven are the 15 factors upon which this reading course is based, consider, for example, what happens when a salesman who lacks confidence in himself and in his goods walks in to see a prospective buyer. Whether the prospective buyer is conscious of it or not, his imagination immediately senses that lack of confidence in the salesman's mind. The salesman's own thoughts are actually undermining his efforts. This will explain, from another angle, why self-confidence is one of the most important factors entering into the great struggle for success. The principle of telepathy and the law of attraction, through which like attracts like, explain many a failure. If the mind has a tendency to attract from the ether those thought vibrations which harmonize with the dominating thoughts of a given mind, you can easily understand why a negative mind that dwells upon failure and lacks the vitalizing force of self-confidence would not attract a positive mind that is dominated by thoughts of success. Perhaps these explanations are somewhat abstract to the student who has not made any particular study of the functioning processes of the mind, but it seems necessary to inject them into this lesson as a means of enabling the student to understand and make practical use of the subject of this lesson. The imagination is too often regarded merely as an indefinite, untraceable, indescribable something that does nothing but create fiction. It is this popular disregard of the powers of the imagination that has made necessary these more or less abstract references to one of the most important subjects of this course. Not only is the subject of imagination an important factor in this course, but it is one of the most interesting subjects, as you will observe when you begin to see how it affects all that you do toward the achievement of your definite chief aim. You will see how important is the subject of imagination when you stop to realize that it is the only thing in the world over which you have absolute control. Others may deprive you of your material wealth and cheat you in 1,000 ways, but no man can deprive you of the control and use of your imagination. Men may deal with you unfairly, as men often do. They may deprive you of your liberty, but they cannot take from you the privilege of using your imagination as you wish. The most inspiring poem in all literature was written by Leigh Hunt while he was a poverty-stricken prisoner in an English prison, where he had been unjustly confined because of his advanced views on politics. This poem is entitled Abu Ben Adhem, and it is here reprinted as a reminder that one of the great things a man may do, in his own imagination, is to forgive those who have dealt unjustly with him. Abu Ben Adhem, may his tribe increase, awoke one night from a deep dream of peace. The man who slanders his fellowmen unwittingly uncovers the real nature of his inner self, and saw within the moonlight of his room, making it rich and like a lily in bloom, an angel writing in a book of gold, exceeding peace had made Ben Adhem bold, and to the presence in the room he said, "What writest thou?" The vision raised its head, and with a look made of all sweet accord answered, "The names of those who love the Lord." "And is mine one?" said Abu. "Nay, not so," replied the angel. Abu spoke more low but cheerily still, and said, "I pray thee then, write me as one that loves his fellow men." The angel wrote and vanished. The next night it came again with a great wakening light, and showed the names whom love of God had blessed, and lo, Ben Adhem's name led all the rest. Civilization itself owes its existence to such men as Leigh Hunt, in whose fertile imaginations have been pictured the higher and nobler standards of human relationship. Abu Ben Adhem is a poem that will never die, thanks to this man who pictured in his imagination the hope of an ideal that is constructive. The major trouble with this world today lies in our lack of understanding of the power of imagination. For if we understood this great power, we could use it as a weapon with which to wipe out poverty and misery and injustice and persecution, and this could be done in a single generation. This is a rather broad statement, and no one understands better than the author of this course how useless such a statement would be if the principle upon which it is founded were not explained in terms of the most practical, workaday nature. Therefore, let us proceed to describe what is meant. To make this description understandable, we must accept as a reality the principle of telepathy, through the operation of which every thought we release is registering itself in the minds of other people. We need devote no time to proving that telepathy is a reality, for the reason that this lesson on imagination cannot be of the slightest value to the student who has not sufficiently informed himself to understand and accept telepathy as an established principle. We will take it for granted that you are one who accepts and understands this principle. You have often heard of mob psychology, which is nothing more nor less than some strong, dominating idea that has been created in the mind of one or more persons and registers itself in the minds of other persons through the principle of telepathy. So strong is the power of mob psychology that two men fighting in the street will often start a free-for-all fight in which bystanders will engage each other in battle without even knowing what they're fighting about or with whom they are fighting. On Armistice Day 191-8, We had evidence in abundance to prove the reality of the principle of telepathy on a scale such as the world had never before witnessed. I remember distinctly the impression made on my mind on that eventful day. So strong was this impression that it awakened me at about 3:00 in the morning, just as effectively as if someone had aroused me by physical force. As I sat up in bed, I knew that something out of the ordinary had happened, and so strange and impelling was the effect of this experience that I got up, dressed myself, and went out in the streets of Chicago, where I was met by thousands of others who had felt the touch of the same influence. Everyone was asking, "What has happened?" What had happened was this: millions of men had received instructions to cease fighting, and their combined joy set into motion a thought wave that swept the entire world and made itself felt in every normal mind that was capable of registering this thought wave. Perhaps never in the history of the world had so many millions of people thought of the same thing, in the same manner, at the same time. For once in the history of the world, everybody felt something in common, and the effect of this harmonized thought was the worldwide mob psychology that we witnessed on Armistice Day. In connection with this statement, it will be helpful if you recall what was said about the method of creating a master mind through the harmony of thought of two or more persons in the introductory lesson of this course. We will bring the application of this principle a little nearer home by showing how it may be made to make or break the harmonious working relationship of a business or industry. You may not have satisfied yourself that it was the harmony of thought of millions of soldiers that registered in the minds of the people of the world and caused the mob psychological condition that was everywhere in evidence on Armistice Day, but you will need no proof that a disgruntled person always disturbs everyone with whom he comes in contact. It is a well-established fact that one such person in a place of employment will disrupt the entire organization. The time is almost at hand when neither the workers nor the employers will tolerate the typical grouch inside of a place of employment, for the reason that his state of mind registers itself in the minds of those about him, resulting in distrust, suspicion, and lack of harmony. The time is near at hand when the workers in a place of employment will no more tolerate one of their own rank and file who is a typical grouch than they would a poisonous snake. Apply the principle in another way. Place among a group of workers one person whose personality is of the positive, optimistic type, and who makes it his business to sow the seeds of harmony around the place where he works, and his influence will reflect itself in every person who works with him. If every business is the extended shadow of one man, as Emerson stated, then it behooves that one man to reflect a shadow of confidence and good cheer and optimism and harmony, that these qualities may, in turn, reflect themselves in all who are connected with the business. In passing to the next step in our application of the power of imagination in the attainment of success, we will cite some of the most recent and modern examples of its use in the accumulation of material wealth and the perfection of some of the leading inventions of the world. In approaching this next step, it should be borne in mind that there is nothing new under the sun. Life on this earth may be likened to a great kaleidoscope before which the scenes and facts and material substances are ever shifting and changing, and all any man can do is to take these facts and substances and rearrange them in new combinations. The process through which this is done is called imagination. We have stated that the imagination is both interpretative and creative in its nature. It can receive impressions or ideas, and out of these it can form new combinations. As our first illustration of the power of imagination in modern business achievement, we will take the case of Clarence Saunders, who organized the Piggly Wiggly system of self-help grocery stores. Saunders was a grocery clerk in a small southern retail store. One day he was standing in a line with a tin tray in his hands, waiting his turn to secure food in a cafeteria. He had never earned more than $20 a week before that time, and no one had ever noticed anything about him that indicated unusual ability, but something took place in his mind as he stood in that line of waiting people that put his imagination to work. With the aid of his imagination, he lifted that self-help idea out of the cafeteria in which he found it, not creating anything new, merely shifting an old idea into a new use, and set it down in a grocery store. In an instant, the Piggly Wiggly chain store grocery plan had been created, and Clarence Saunders, the $20 a week grocery clerk, rapidly became the $1 million chain store grocerman of America. Where in that transaction do you see the slightest indication of a performance that you could not duplicate? It will make a big difference to you whether you are a person with a message or a person with a grievance. Analyze this transaction and measure it by the previous lessons of this course, and you will see that Clarence Saunders created a very definite purpose. He supported this purpose with sufficient self-confidence to cause him to take the initiative to transform it into reality. His imagination was the workshop in which these three factors, definite purpose, self-confidence, and initiative, were brought together and made to supply the momentum for the first step in the organization of the Piggly Wiggly plan. Thus our great ideas changed into realities. When Thomas A. Edison invented the incandescent electric light bulb, he merely brought together two old, well-known principles and associated them in a new combination. Mr. Edison and practically all others who were informed on the subject of electricity knew that a light could be produced by heating a small wire with electricity, but the difficult problem was to do this without burning the wire in two. In his experimental research, Mr. Edison tried out every conceivable sort of wire, hoping to find some substance that would withstand the tremendous heat to which it had to be subjected before a light could be produced. His invention was half completed, but it was of no practical value until he could find the missing link that would supply the other half. After thousands of tests and much combining of old ideas in his imagination, Edison finally found this missing link. In his study of physics, he had learned, as all other students of this subject learn, that there can be no combustion without the presence of oxygen. He of course knew that the difficulty with his electric light apparatus was the lack of a method through which to control the heat. When it occurred to him that there could be no combustion where there was no oxygen, he placed the little wire of his electric light apparatus inside of a glass globe, shut out all the oxygen, and lo, the mighty incandescent light was a reality. When the sun goes down tonight, you step to the wall, press a button, and bring it back again, a performance that would have mystified the people of a few generations ago, and yet there is no mystery back of your act. Thanks to the use of Edison's imagination, you have simply brought together two principles, both of which were in existence since the beginning of time. No one who knew him intimately ever accredited Andrew Carnegie with unusual ability or the power of genius, except in one respect, and that was his ability to select men who could and would cooperate in a spirit of harmony in carrying out his wishes. But what additional ability did he need in the accumulation of his millions of dollars? Any man who understands the principle of organized effort, as Carnegie understood it, and knows enough about men to be able to select just those types that are needed in the performance of a given task, could duplicate all that Carnegie accomplished. Carnegie was a man of imagination. He first created a definite purpose, and then surrounded himself with men who had the training and the vision and the capacity necessary for the transformation of that purpose into reality. Carnegie did not always create his own plans for the attainment of his definite purpose. He made it his business to know what he wanted, then found the men who could create plans through which to procure it. And that was not only imagination, it was genius of the highest order. But it should be made clear that men of Mr. Carnegie's type are not the only ones who can make profitable use of imagination. This great power is as available to the beginner in business as it is to the man who has arrived. One morning, Charles M. Schwab's private car was backed on the side track at his Bethlehem steel plant. As he alighted from his car, he was met by a young man stenographer who announced that he had come to make sure that any letters or telegrams Mr. Schwab might wish to write would be taken care of promptly. No one told this young man to be on hand, but he had enough imagination to see that his being there would not hurt his chances of advancement. From that day on, this young man was marked for promotion. Mr. Schwab singled him out for promotion because he had done that which any of the dozen or so other stenographers in the employ of the Bethlehem Steel Company might have done, but didn't. Today this same man is the president of one of the largest drug concerns in the world, and has all of this world's goods and wares that he wants and much more than he needs. A few years ago I received a letter from a young man who had just finished business college and who wanted to secure employment in my office. With his letter he sent a crisp $10 bill that had never been folded. The letter read as follows: I have just finished a commercial course in a first-class business college, and I want a position in your office because I realize how much it would be worth to a young man, just starting out on his business career, to have the privilege of working under the direction of a man like you. If the enclosed $10 bill is sufficient to pay for the time you would spend in giving me my first week's instructions, I want you to accept it. I will work the first month without pay, and you may set my wages after that at whatever I prove to be worth. I want this job more than I ever wanted anything in my life, and I am willing to make any reasonable sacrifice to get it. Very cordially, this young man got his chance in my office. His imagination gained for him the opportunity that he wanted, and before his first month had expired, the president of a life insurance company, who heard of this incident, offered the young man a private secretaryship at a substantial salary. He is today an official of one of the largest life insurance companies in the world. Some years ago, a young man wrote to Thomas A. Edison for a position. For some reason, Mr. Edison did not reply. By no means discouraged on this account, the young man made up his mind that he would not only get a reply from Mr. Edison, but what was more important still, he would actually secure the position he sought. He lived a long distance from West Orange, New Jersey, where the Edison Industries are located, and he did not have the money with which to pay his railroad fare, but he did have imagination. He went to West Orange in a freight car, got his interview, told his story in person, and got the job he sought. Today this same man lives in Bradenton, Florida. He has retired from active business, having made all the money he needs. His name, in case you wish to confirm my statements, is Edwin C. Barnes. By using his imagination, Mr. Barnes saw the advantage of close association with a man like Thomas A. Edison. He saw that such an association would give him the opportunity to study Mr. Edison, and at the same time it would bring him in contact with Mr. Edison's friends, who are among the most influential people of the world. These are but a few cases in connection with which I have personally observed how men have climbed to high places in the world and accumulated wealth in abundance by making practical use of their imagination. Theodore Roosevelt engraved his name on the tablets of time by one single act during his tenure of office as President of the United States, and after all else that he did while in that office will have been forgotten, this one transaction will record him in history as a man of imagination. He started the steam shovels to work on the Panama Canal. Every president from Washington on up to Roosevelt could have started the canal and it would have been completed, but it seemed such a colossal undertaking that it required not only imagination but daring courage as well. Roosevelt had both, and the people of the United States have the canal. At the age of 40, the age at which the average man begins to think he is too old to start anything new, James J. Hill was still sitting at the telegraph key, at a salary of $30 per month. He had no capital. The reason most people do not like to hear the story of your troubles is that they have a big flock of their own. He had no influential friends with capital, but he did have that which is more powerful than either imagination. In his mind's eye he saw a great railway system that would penetrate the undeveloped Northwest and unite the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. So vivid was his imagination that he made others see the advantages of such a railway system, and from there on the story is familiar enough to every schoolboy. I would emphasize the part of the story that most people never mention, that Hill's great Northern Railway system became a reality in his own imagination first. The railroad was built with steel rails and wooden cross ties, just as other railroads are built, and these things were paid for with capital that was secured in very much the same manner that capital for all railroads is secured. But if you want the real story of James J. Hill's success, you must go back to that little country railway station where he worked at $30 a month, and there pick up the little threads that he wove into a mighty railroad, with materials no more visible than the thoughts which he organized in his imagination. What a mighty power is imagination, the workshop of the soul, in which thoughts are woven into railroads and skyscrapers and mills and factories and all manner of material wealth. I hold it true that thoughts are things. They're endowed with bodies and breath and wings, and that we send them forth to fill the world with good results or ill. That which we call our secret thought speeds forth to earth's remotest spot, leaving its blessings or its woes like tracks behind it as it goes. We build our future, thought by thought, for good or ill, yet know it not, yet so the universe was wrought. Thought is another name for fate. Choose then thy destiny and wait, for love brings love and hate brings hate. If your imagination is the mirror of your soul, then you have a perfect right to stand before that mirror and see yourself as you wish to be. You have the right to see reflected in that magic mirror the mansion you intend to own, the factory you intend to manage, the bank of which you intend to be president, the station in life you intend to occupy. Your imagination belongs to you. Use it. The more you use it, the more efficiently it will serve you. At the east end of the Great Brooklyn Bridge in New York City, an old man conducts a cobbler's shop. When the engineers began driving stakes and marking the foundation place for that great steel structure, this man shook his head and said, "It can't be done." Now he looks out from his dingy little shoe repair shop, shakes his head and asks himself, how did they do it? He saw the bridge grow before his very eyes, and still he lacks the imagination to analyze that which he saw. The engineer who planned the bridge saw it a reality long before a single shovel of dirt had been removed for the foundation stones. The bridge became a reality in his imagination because he had trained that imagination to weave new combinations out of old ideas. Through recent experiments in the Department of Electricity, one of our great educational institutions of America has discovered how to put flowers to sleep and wake them up again with electric sunlight. This discovery makes possible the growth of vegetables and flowers without the aid of sunshine. In a few more years, the city dweller will be raising a crop of vegetables on his back porch, with the aid of a few boxes of dirt and a few electric lights, with some new vegetable maturing every month of the year. This new discovery, plus a little imagination, plus Luther Burbank's discoveries in the field of horticulture, and lo, the city dweller will not only grow vegetables all the year around, within the confines of his back porch, but he will grow bigger vegetables than any which the modern gardener grows in the open sunlight. In one of the cities on the coast of California, all of the land that was suitable for building lots had been developed and put into use. On one side of the city there were some steep hills that could not be used for building purposes, and on the other side the land was unsuitable for buildings because it was so low that the backwater covered it once a day. A man of imagination came to this city. Men of imagination usually have keen minds, and this man was no exception. The first day of his arrival, he saw the possibilities for making money out of real estate. He secured an option on those hills that were unsuitable for use because of their steepness. He also secured an option on the ground that was unsuitable for use because of the backwater that covered it daily. He secured these options at a very low price because the ground was supposed to be without substantial value. With the use of a few tons of explosives, he turned those steep hills into loose dirt. With the aid of a few tractors and some road scrapers, he leveled the ground down and turned it into beautiful building lots. And with the aid of a few mules and carts, he dumped the surplus dirt on the low ground and raised it above the water level, thereby turning it into beautiful building lots. He made a substantial fortune. For what? For removing some dirt from where it was not needed to where it was needed. For mixing some useless dirt with imagination. The people of that little city gave this man credit for being a genius, and he was the same sort of genius that any one of them could have been had he used his imagination as this man used his. In the field of chemistry, it is possible to mix two or more chemical ingredients in such proportions that the mere act of mixing gives each of the ingredients a tremendous amount of energy that it did not possess. It is also possible to mix certain chemical ingredients in such proportions that all the ingredients of the combination take on an entirely different nature, as in the case of H2O, which is a mixture of 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen, creating water. Chemistry is not the only field in which a combination of various physical materials can be so assembled that each takes on a greater value, or the result is a product entirely foreign in nature to that of its component parts. The man who blew up those useless hills of dirt and stone and removed the surplus from where it was not needed over to the lowland, where it was needed, gave that dirt and stone a value that it did not have before. A ton of pig iron is worth but little. Add to that pig iron carbon, silicon, manganese, sulfur, and phosphorus in the right proportions, and you have transformed it into steel, which is of much greater value. Add still other substances in the right proportion, including some skilled labor, and that same ton of steel is transformed into watch springs worth a small fortune. But in all these transformation processes, the one ingredient that is worth most is the one that has no material form imagination. Here lie great piles of loose brick, lumber, nails, and glass. In its present form it is worse than useless, for it is a nuisance and an eyesore. But mix it with the architect's imagination and add some skilled labor, and lo, it becomes a beautiful mansion worth a king's ransom. On one of the great highways between New York and Philadelphia stood an old ramshackle, time-worn barn, worth less than $50. With the aid of a little lumber and some cement, plus imagination, this old barn has been turned into a beautiful automobile supply station that earns a small fortune for the man who supplied the imagination. Across the street from my office is a little print shop that earns coffee and rolls for its owner and his helper, but no more. Less than a dozen blocks away stands one of the most modern printing plants in the world, whose owner spends most of his time traveling and has far more wealth than he will ever use. I know I am here. I know I had nothing to do with my coming, and I shall have but little, if anything, to do with my going. Therefore I will not worry, because worries are of no avail. 22 years ago those two printers were in business together. The one who owns the big print shop had the good judgment to ally himself with a man who mixed imagination with printing. This man of imagination is a writer of advertisements, and he keeps the printing plant with which he is associated supplied with more business than it can handle by analyzing its client's business, creating attractive advertising features, and supplying the necessary printed material with which to make these features of service. This plant receives top-notch prices for its printing because the imagination mixed with that printing produces a product that most printers cannot supply. In the city of Chicago, the level of a certain boulevard was raised, which spoiled a row of beautiful residences because the sidewalk was raised to the level of the second-story windows. While the property owners were bemoaning their ill fortune, a man of imagination came along, purchased the property for a song, converted the second stories into business property, and now enjoys a handsome income from his rentals. As you read these lines, please keep in mind all that was stated in the beginning of this lesson, especially the fact that the greatest and most profitable thing you can do with your imagination is the act of rearranging old ideas in new combinations. If you properly use your imagination, it will help you convert your failures and mistakes into assets of priceless value. It will lead you to discovery of a truth known only to those who use their imagination. Namely, that the greatest reverses and misfortunes of life often open the door to golden opportunities. One of the finest and most highly paid engravers in the United States was formerly a mail carrier. One day he was fortunate enough to be on a street car that met with an accident and had one of his legs cut off. The street railway company paid him $5,000 for his leg. With this money he paid his way through school and became an engraver. The product of his hands plus his imagination is worth much more than he could earn with his legs as a mail carrier. He discovered that he had imagination when it became necessary to redirect his efforts as a result of the streetcar accident. You will never know what is your capacity for achievement until you learn how to mix your efforts with imagination. The products of your hands minus imagination will yield you but a small return, but those self-same hands, when properly guided by imagination, can be made to earn you all the material wealth you can use. There are two ways in which you can profit by imagination. You can develop this faculty in your own mind, or you can ally yourself with those who have already developed it. Andrew Carnegie did both. He not only made use of his own fertile imagination, but he gathered around him a group of other men who also possessed this essential quality, for his definite purpose in life called for specialists whose imagination ran in numerous directions. In that group of men that constituted Mr. Carnegie's mastermind were men whose imaginations were confined to the field of chemistry. He had other men in the group whose imaginations were confined to finances. He had still others whose imaginations were confined to salesmanship, one of whom was Charles M. Schwab, who is said to have been the most able salesman on Mr. Carnegie's staff. If you feel that your own imagination is inadequate, you should form an alliance with someone whose imagination is sufficiently developed to supply your deficiency. There are various forms of alliance. For example, there is the alliance of marriage and the alliance of a business partnership and the alliance of friendship and the alliance of employer and employee. Not all men have the capacity to serve their own best interests as employers, and those who haven't this capacity may profit by allying themselves with men of imagination who have such capacity. It is said that Mr. Carnegie made more millionaires of his employees than any other employer in the steel business. Among these was Charles M. Schwab, who displayed evidence of the soundest sort of imagination by his good judgment in allying himself with Mr. Carnegie. It is no disgrace to serve in the capacity of employee. To the contrary, it often proves to be the most profitable side of an alliance, since not all men are fitted to assume the responsibility of directing other men. Perhaps there is no field of endeavor in which imagination plays such an important part as it does in salesmanship. The master salesman sees the merits of the goods he sells or the service he is rendering in his own imagination, and if he fails to do so, he will not make the sale. A few years ago, a sale was made which is said to have been the most far-reaching and important sale of its kind ever made. The object of the sale was not merchandise, but the freedom of a man who was confined in the Ohio penitentiary and the development of a prison reform system that promises a sweeping change in the method of dealing with unfortunate men and women who have become entangled in the meshes of the law. That you may observe just how imagination plays the leading part in salesmanship, I will analyze this sale for you, with due apologies for personal references, which cannot be avoided without destroying much of the value of the illustration. A few years ago, I was invited to speak before the inmates of the Ohio penitentiary. When I stepped upon the platform, I saw in the audience before me a man whom I had known as a successful businessman more than 10 years previously. That man was B., whose pardon I later secured, and the story of whose release has been spread upon the front page of practically every newspaper in the United States. Perhaps you will recall it. After I had completed my address, I interviewed Mr. B and found out that he had been sentenced for forgery for a period of 20 years. After he had told me his story, I said, "I will have you out of here in less than 60 days. With a forced smile, he replied, "I admire your spirit but question your judgment. Why, do you know that at least 20 influential men have tried every means at their command to get me released without success? It can't be done." I suppose it was that last remark, "it can't be done," that challenged me to show him that it could be done. I returned to New York City and requested my wife to pack her trunks and get ready for an indefinite stay in the city of Columbus, where the Ohio Penitentiary is located. I had a definite purpose in mind. That purpose was to get B out of the Ohio Penitentiary. Not only did I have in mind securing his release, but I intended to do it in such a way that his release would erase from his breast the scarlet letter of convict, and at the same time reflect credit upon all who helped to bring about his release. Not once did I doubt that I would bring about his release, for no salesman can make a sale if he doubts that he can do it. My wife and I returned to Columbus and took up permanent headquarters. The next day I called on the governor of Ohio and stated the object of my visit in about these words: "Governor, I have come to ask you to release B from the Ohio Penitentiary. I have sound reason for asking his release, and I hope you will give him his freedom at once, but I have come prepared to stay until he is released, no matter how long that may be." During his imprisonment, B has inaugurated a system of correspondence instruction in the Ohio Penitentiary, as you of course know. He has influenced 172 of the 251 prisoners of the Ohio Penitentiary to take up courses of instruction. He has managed to beg sufficient textbooks and lesson materials with which to keep these men at work on their lessons, and has done this without a penny of expense to the state of Ohio. The warden and the chaplain of the penitentiary tell me that he has carefully observed the prison rules. Surely a man who can influence 172 men to turn their efforts towards, if you have been wise and successful, I congratulate you. Unless you are unable to forget how successful you have been, then I pity you. Their efforts toward self-betterment cannot be a very bad sort of fellow. I have come to ask you to release B, because I wish to place him at the head of a prison school that will give the 160,000 inmates of the other penitentiaries of the United States a chance to profit by his influence. I am prepared to assume full responsibility for his conduct after his release. That is my case, but before you give me your answer, I want you to know that I am not unmindful of the fact that your enemies will probably criticize you if you release him. In fact, if you release him, it may cost you many votes if you run for office again. With his fist clenched and his broad jaw set firmly, Governor Vic Donahue of Ohio said, "If that is what you want with B, I will release him if it costs me 5,000 votes. However, before I sign the pardon, I want you to see the Clemency Board and secure its favorable recommendation. I want you also to secure the favorable recommendation of the warden and the chaplain of the Ohio Penitentiary. You know a governor is amenable to the court of public opinion, and these gentlemen are the representatives of that court." The sale had been made, and the whole transaction had required less than 5 minutes. The next day I returned to the governor's office, accompanied by the chaplain of the Ohio Penitentiary, and notified the governor that the Clemency Board, the warden, and the chaplain all joined in recommending the release. 3 days later the pardon was signed and B walked through the big iron gates, a free man. I have cited the details to show you that there was nothing difficult about the transaction. The groundwork for the release had all been prepared before I came upon the scene. B had done that by his good conduct and the service he had rendered those 172 prisoners. When he created the world's first prison correspondence school system, he created the key that unlocked the prison doors for himself. Why then had the others who asked for his release failed to secure it? They failed because they used no imagination. Perhaps they asked the governor for B's release on the ground that his parents were prominent people, or on the ground that he was a college graduate and not a bad sort of fellow. They failed to supply the governor of Ohio with a sufficient motive to justify him in granting a pardon, for had this not been so, he would undoubtedly have released B long before I came upon the scene and asked for his release. Before I went to see the governor, I went over all the facts, and in my own imagination I saw myself in the governor's place, and made up my mind what sort of a presentation would appeal most strongly to me if I were in reality in his place. When I asked for B's release, I did so in the name of the 160,000 unfortunate men, and women inmates of the prisons of the United States who would enjoy the benefits of the correspondence school system that he had created. I said nothing about his prominent parents. I said nothing about my friendship with him during former years. I said nothing about his being a deserving fellow. All these matters might have been used as sound reasons for his release, but they seemed insignificant when compared with the bigger and sounder reason that his release would be of help to 160,000 other people who would feel the influence of his correspondence school system after his release. When the governor of Ohio came to a decision, I doubt not that B was of secondary importance as far as his decision was concerned. The governor no doubt saw a possible benefit, not to B alone, but to 160,000 other men and women who needed the influence that B could supply if released, and that was imagination. It was also salesmanship. In speaking of the incident after it was over, one of the men who had worked diligently for more than a year in trying to secure B's freedom asked, "How did you do it?" And I replied, "It was the easiest task I ever performed, because most of the work had been done before I took hold of it. In fact, I didn't do it, B did it himself." This man looked at me in bewilderment. He did not see that which I am here trying to make clear, namely, that practically all difficult tasks are easily performed if one approaches them from the right angle. There were two important factors entering B's release. The first was the fact that he had supplied the material for a good case before I took it in charge, and the second was the fact that before I called on the governor of Ohio, I so completely convinced myself that I had a right to ask for B's release that I had no difficulty in presenting my case effectively. Go back to what was stated in the beginning of this lesson on the subject of telepathy and apply it to this case. The governor could tell long before I had stated my mission that I knew I had a good case. If my brain did not telegraph this thought to his brain, then the look of self-confidence in my eyes and the positive tone of my voice made obvious my belief in the merits of my case. Again, I apologize for these personal references, with the explanation that I have used them only because the whole of America was familiar with the B case that I have described. I disclaim all credit for the small part I played in the case, for I did nothing except use my imagination as an assembly room in which to piece together the factors out of which the sale was made. I did nothing except that which any salesman of imagination could have done. It requires considerable courage to prompt one to use the personal pronoun as freely as it has been used in relating the facts connected with this case, but justification lies in the value of application of the principle of imagination to a case with which nearly everybody is familiar. I cannot recall an incident in my entire life in connection with which the soundness of the 15 factors that enter into this reading course was more clearly manifested than it was in securing the release of B. It is but another link in a long chain of evidence that proves to my entire satisfaction the power of imagination as a factor in salesmanship. There are endless millions of approaches to every problem, but there is only one best approach. Find this one best approach and your problem is easily solved. No matter how much merit your goods may have, there are millions of wrong ways in which to offer them. Your imagination will assist you in finding the right way. In your search for the right way in which to offer your merchandise or your services, remember this peculiar trait of mankind. Men will grant favors that you request for the benefit of a third person when they would not grant them if requested for your benefit. Compare this statement with the fact that I asked the governor of Ohio to release B, not as a favor to me, and not as a favor to B, but for the benefit of 160,000 unfortunate inmates of the prisons of America. Salesmen of imagination always offer their wares in such terminology that the advantages of those wares to the prospective purchaser are obvious. It is seldom that any man makes a purchase of merchandise or renders another a favor just to accommodate the salesman. It is a prominent trait of human nature that prompts us all to do that which advances our own interests. This is a cold, indisputable fact, claims of the idealist to the contrary notwithstanding. To be perfectly plain, men are selfish. To understand the truth is to understand how to present your case, whether you are asking for the release of a man from prison or offering for sale some commodity. In your own imagination, so plan your presentation of your case that the strongest and most impelling advantages to the buyer are made plain. This is imagination. I never see a person trying to disclose the scarlet letter on another's breast that I do not wonder if he doesn't carry some mark of disgrace which would have ruined him had he been overtaken by justice. A farmer moved to the city, taking with him his well-trained shepherd dog. He soon found that the dog was out of place in the city, so he decided to get rid of him. Note the words in quotation, Taking the dog with him, he went out into the country and rapped on the door of a farmhouse. A man came hobbling to the door on crutches. The man with the dog greeted the man in the house in these words, "You wouldn't care to buy a fine shepherd dog that I wish to get rid of, would you?" The man on crutches replied, "No," and closed the door. The man with the dog called at half a dozen other farmhouses, asking the same question, and received the same answer. He made up his mind that no one wanted the dog and returned to the city. That evening he was telling of his misfortune to a man of imagination. The man heard how the owner of the dog had tried in vain to get rid of him. "Let me dispose of the dog for you," said the man of imagination. The owner was willing. The next morning the man of imagination took the dog out into the country and stopped at the first farmhouse at which the owner of the dog had called the day before. The same old man hobbled out on crutches and answered the knock at the door. The man of imagination greeted him in this fashion, "I see you are all crippled with rheumatism. What you need is a fine dog to run errands for you. I have a dog here that has been trained to bring home the cows, drive away wild animals, herd the sheep, and perform other useful services. You may have this dog for $100. "All right," said the crippled man, "I'll take him." That too was imagination. No one wants a dog that someone else wants to get rid of, but most anyone would like to own a dog that would herd sheep and bring home the cows and perform other useful services. The dog was the same one that the crippled buyer had refused the day before. But the man who sold the dog was not the man who had tried to get rid of him. If you use your imagination, you will know that no one wants anything that someone else is trying to get rid of. Remember that which was said about the law of attraction, through the operation of which like attracts like. If you look and act the part of a failure, you will attract nothing but failures. Whatever your life work may be, it calls for the use of imagination. Niagara Falls was nothing but a great mass of roaring water until a man of imagination harnessed it and converted the wasted energy into electric current that now turns the wheels of industry. Before this man of imagination came along, millions of people had seen and heard those roaring falls, but lacked the imagination to harness them. The first Rotary Club of the world was born in the fertile imagination of Paul Harris, of Chicago, who saw in this child of his brain an effective means of cultivating prospective clients and the extension of his law practice. The ethics of the legal profession forbid advertising in the usual way, but Paul Harris' imagination found a way to extend his law practice without advertising in the usual way. If the winds of fortune are temporarily blowing against you, remember that you can harness them and make them carry you toward your definite purpose through the use of your imagination. A kite rises against the wind, not with it. Dr. Frank Crane was a struggling, third-rate preacher until the starvation wages of the clergy forced him to use his imagination. Now he earns upward of $100,000 a year for an hour's work a day writing essays. Bud Fisher once worked for a mere pittance, but he now earns $75,000 a year by making folks grin with his Mutt and Jeff comic strip. No art goes into his drawings, therefore he must be selling his imagination. Woolworth was a poorly paid clerk in a retail store, poorly paid, perhaps, because he had not yet found out that he had imagination. Before he died, he built the tallest office building in the world and girdled the United States with 5 and 10-cent stores through the use of his imagination. You will observe, by analyzing these illustrations, that a close study of human nature played an important part in the achievements mentioned. To make profitable use of your imagination, you must make it give you a keen insight into the motives that cause men to do or refrain from doing a given act. If your imagination leads you to understand how quickly people grant your requests when those requests appeal to their self-interest, you can have practically anything you go after. I saw my wife make a very clever sale to our baby not long ago. The baby was pounding the top of our mahogany library table with a spoon. When my wife reached for the spoon, the baby refused to give it up, but being a woman of imagination, she offered the baby a nice stick of red candy. He dropped the spoon immediately and centered his attention on the more desirable object. That was imagination. It was also salesmanship. She won her point without using force. I was riding in an automobile with a friend who was driving beyond the speed limit. An officer rode up on a motorcycle and told my friend he was under arrest for speeding. The friend smiled pleasantly at the officer and said, "I'm sorry to have brought you out in all this rain, but I wanted to make the 10 o'clock train with my friend here, and I was hitting it up around 35 miles an hour. "No, you were only going 28 miles an hour, replied the officer, "and as long as you are so nice about it, I will let you off this time if you will watch yourself hereafter." And that, too, was imagination. Even a traffic cop will listen to reason when approached in the right manner, But woe unto the motorist who tries to bully the cop into believing his speedometer was not registering properly. There is one form of imagination against which I would caution you. It is the brand which prompts some people to imagine that they can get something for nothing, or that they can force themselves ahead in the world without observing the rights of others. There are more than 160,000 prisoners in the penal institutions of the United States, practically every one of whom is in prison, because he imagined he could play the game of life without observing the rights of his fellow men. There is a man in the Ohio penitentiary who has served more than 35 years of time for forgery, and the largest amount he ever got from his misapplication of imagination was $12. There are few people who direct their imaginations in the vain attempt to work out a way to show what happens when an immovable body comes in contact with an irresistible force, but these types belong in the psychopathic hospitals. There is also another form of misapplied imagination, namely that of the young boy or girl who knows more about life than his or her dad, but this form is subject to modification with time. My own boys have taught me many things that my dad tried in vain to teach me when I was their age. Time and imagination, which is often but the product of time, teach us many things, but nothing of more importance than this: that all men are much alike in many ways. If you would know what your customer is thinking, Mr. Salesman, study yourself and find out what you would be thinking if you were in your customer's place. Study yourself, find out what are the motives which actuate you in the performance of certain deeds and cause you to refrain from performing other deeds, and you will have gone far toward perfecting yourself in the accurate use of imagination. The detective's biggest asset is imagination. The first question he asks when called in to solve a crime is, what was the motive? If he can find out, we all like commendation and many of us like flattery, but it is a debatable question as to whether the indulgence of these tendencies builds character and strength and individuality. Motive: he can usually find the perpetrator of the crime. A man who had lost a horse posted a reward of $5 for its return. Several days later, a boy who was supposed to have been weak-minded came leading the horse home and claimed the reward. The owner was curious to know how the boy found the horse. "How did you ever think where to look for the horse?" he asked, and the boy replied, "Well, I just thought where I would have gone if I had been a horse and went there, and he had. Not so bad for a weak-minded fellow." Some who are not accused of being weak-minded go all the way through life without displaying as much evidence of imagination as did this boy. If you want to know what the other fellow will do, use your imagination, put yourself in his place, and find out what you would have done. That's imagination. Every person should be somewhat of a dreamer. Every business needs the dreamer. Every industry and every profession needs him. But the dreamer must be also a doer, or else he must form an alliance with someone who can and does translate dreams into reality. The greatest nation upon the face of this earth was conceived, born and nurtured through the early days of its childhood, as the result of imagination in the minds of men who combined dreams with action. Your mind is capable of creating many new and useful combinations of old ideas, but the most important thing it can create is a definite chief aim that will give you that which you most desire. Your definite chief aim can be speedily translated into reality after you have fashioned it in the cradle of your imagination. If you have faithfully followed the instructions set down for your guidance in Lesson 2, you are now well on the road toward success, because you know what it is that you want, and you have a plan for getting that which you want. The battle for the achievement of success is half won when one knows definitely what is wanted. The battle is all over except the shouting when one knows what is wanted and has made up his mind to get it, whatever the price may be. The selection of a definite chief aim calls for the use of both imagination and decision. The power of decision grows with use. Prompt decision in forcing the imagination to create a definite chief aim renders more powerful the capacity to reach decisions in other matters. Adversities and temporary defeat are generally blessings in disguise, for the reason that they force one to use both imagination and decision. This is why a man usually makes a better fight when his back is to the wall and he knows there is no retreat. He then reaches the decision to fight instead of running. The imagination is never quite so active as it is when one faces some emergency calling for quick and definite decision and action. In these moments of emergency, men have reached decisions, built plans, used their imagination in such a manner that they became known as geniuses. Many a genius has been born out of the necessity for unusual stimulation of the imagination as the result of some trying experience which forced quick thought and prompt decision. It is a well-known fact that the only manner in which an overpampered boy or girl may be made to become useful is by forcing him or her to become self-sustaining. This calls for the exercise of both imagination and decision, neither of which would be used except out of necessity. The Reverend P. W. Welshamer is the pastor of a church in Canton, Ohio, where he has been located for nearly a quarter of a century. Ordinarily, pastors do not remain at the head of one church for so great a length of time, and Reverend Welshamer would have been no exception to this rule if he had not mixed imagination with his pastoral duties. 3 years constitute the usual time that one pastor may remain in a given pastorate without wearing out his welcome. The church of which Reverend Welshamer is the leader has a Sunday school of over 5,000 members, the largest membership enjoyed by any church in the United States. No pastor could have remained at the head of one church for a quarter of a century, with the full consent of his followers, and have built up a Sunday school of this size, without employing the laws of initiative and leadership, a definite chief aim, self-confidence, and imagination. The author of this course made it his business to study the methods employed by Reverend Welshamer, and they are here described for the benefit of the students of this philosophy. It is a well-known fact that church factions, jealousy, and so on often lead to disagreements which make a change in leaders essential. Reverend Welshamer has steered around this common obstacle by a unique application of the law of imagination. When a new member comes into his church, he immediately assigns a definite task to that member, one that suits the temperament, training, and business qualifications of the individual, as nearly as possible, and to use the minister's own words, he keeps each member so busy pulling for the church that there is no time left for kicking or disagreeing with other members. Not a bad policy for application in the field of business. Or in any other field, the old saying that idle hands are the devil's best tools is more than a mere play upon words, for it is true. Give any man something to do that he likes to do, and keep him busy doing it, and he will not be apt to degenerate into a disorganizing force. If any member of the Sunday school misses attendance twice in succession, a committee from the church calls to find out the reason for the failure to attend. There is a committee job for practically every member of the church. In this way, Reverend Welshamer delegates to the members themselves the responsibility of rounding up the delinquents and keeping them interested in church affairs. He is an organizer of the highest type. His efforts have attracted the attention of businessmen throughout the country, and times too numerous to be mentioned he has been offered positions, at fancy salaries, by banks, steel plants, business houses, and so on, that recognized in him a real leader. In the basement of the church, Reverend Welshamer operates a first-class printing plant where he publishes, weekly, a very creditable church paper that goes to all the members. The production and distribution of this paper is another source of employment which keeps the church members out of mischief, as practically all of them take some sort of an active interest in it. The paper is devoted exclusively to the affairs of the church as a whole and those of the individual members. It is read by each member, line by line, because there is always a chance that each member's name may be mentioned in the news locals. The church has a well-trained choir and an orchestra that would be a credit to some of the largest theaters. Here Reverend Welshamer serves the double purpose of supplying entertainment and at the same time keeping the more temperamental members who are artists employed so they also remain out of mischief, incidentally giving them a chance to do that which they like best. The late Dr. Harper, who was formerly president of the University of Chicago, was one of the most efficient college presidents of his time. He had a penchant for raising funds in large amounts. It was he who induced John D. Rockefeller to contribute millions of dollars to the support of the University of Chicago. It may be helpful to the student of this philosophy to study Dr. Harper's technique, because he was a leader of the highest order. Moreover, I have his own word for it that his leadership was never a matter of chance or accident, but always the result of carefully planned procedure. The following incident will serve to show just how Dr. Harper made use of imagination in raising money in large sums. He needed an extra $1 million for the "we cannot sow thistles and reap clover." Nature simply does not run things that way. She goes by cause and effect, construction of a new building. Taking inventory of the wealthy men of Chicago to whom he might turn for this large sum, he decided upon 2 men, each of whom was a millionaire, and both were bitter enemies. One of these men was, at that time, the head of the Chicago Street Railway system. Choosing the noon hour when the office force and this man's secretary in particular would be apt to be out at lunch, Dr. Harper nonchalantly strolled into the office, and finding no one on guard at the outer door, walked into the office of his intended victim, whom he surprised by his appearance unannounced. "My name is Harper," said the doctor, "and I am president of the University of Chicago. Pardon my intrusion, but I found no one in the outer office, which was no mere accident, so I took the liberty of walking on in. I have thought of you and your street railway system many, many times. You have built up a wonderful system, and I understand that you have made lots of money for your efforts. I never think of you, however, without its occurring to me that one of these days you will be passing out into the great unknown, and after you are gone there will be nothing left as a monument to your name, because others will take over your money, and money has a way of losing its identity very quickly, as soon as it changes hands. I have often thought of offering you the opportunity to perpetuate your name by permitting you to build a new hall out on the university grounds and naming it after you. I would have offered you this opportunity long ago had it not been for the fact that one of the members of our board wishes the honor to go to Mr. X, the streetcar head's enemy. Personally, however, I have always favored you and I still favor you, and if I have your permission to do so, I am going to try to swing the opposition over to you. I have not come to ask for any decision today, however, as I was just passing and thought it a good time to drop in and meet you. Think the matter over, and if you wish to talk to me about it again, telephone me at your leisure. Good day, sir. I am happy to have had this opportunity of meeting you." With this, he bowed himself out without giving the head of the streetcar company a chance to say either yes or no. In fact, the streetcar man had very little chance to do any talking. Dr. Harper did the talking. That was as he planned it to be. He went into the office merely to plant the seed, believing that it would germinate and spring into life in due time. His belief was not without foundation. He had hardly returned to his office at the university when the telephone rang. The streetcar man was on the other end of the wire. He asked for an appointment with Dr. Harper, which was granted, and the two met in Dr. Harper's office the next morning, and the check for $1 million was in Dr. Harper's hands an hour later. Despite the fact that Dr. Harper was a small, rather insignificant-looking man, it was said of him that he had a way about him that enabled him to get everything he went after. And as to this way that he was reputed to have had, what was it? It was nothing more nor less than his understanding of the power of imagination. Suppose he had gone to the office of the streetcar head and asked for an appointment. Sufficient time would have elapsed between the time he called and the time when he would have actually seen his man, to have enabled the latter to anticipate the reason for his call, and also to formulate a good, logical excuse for saying no. Suppose, again, he had opened his interview with the streetcar man something like this: "The university is badly in need of funds, and I have come to you to ask your help. You have made lots of money, and you owe something to the community in which you have made it," which perhaps was true. "If you will give us $1 million, we will place your name on a new hall that we wish to build." What might have been the result? In the first place, there would have been no motive suggested that was sufficiently appealing to sway the mind of the streetcar man. While it may have been true that he owed something to the community from which he had made a fortune, he probably would not have admitted that fact. In the second place, he would have enjoyed the position of being on the offensive instead of the defensive side of the proposal. But Dr. Harper, shrewd in the use of imagination as he was, provided for just such contingencies by the way he stated his case. First, he placed the streetcar man on the defensive by informing him that it was not certain that he, Dr. Harper, could get the permission of his board to accept the money and name the hall after the streetcar man. In the second place, he intensified the desire of the streetcar man to have his name on that building because of the thought that his enemy and competitor might get the honor if it got away from him. Moreover, and this was no accident either, Dr. Harper had made a powerful appeal to one of the most common of all human weaknesses by showing this streetcar man how to perpetuate his own name. All of which required a practical application of the law of imagination. Dr. Harper was a master salesman. When he asked men for money, he always paved the way for success by planting in the mind of the man of whom he asked it a good sound reason why the money should be given. A reason which emphasized some advantage accruing to the man as the result of the gift. Often this would take on the form of a business advantage. Again, it would take on the nature of an appeal to that part of man's nature which prompts him to wish to perpetuate his name so it will live after him. But always the request for money was carried out according to a plan that had been carefully thought out, embellished and smoothed down with the use of imagination. While the law of success philosophy was in the embryonic stage, long before it had been organized into a systematic course of instruction and reduced to textbooks, the author was lecturing on this philosophy in a small town in Illinois. One of the members of the audience was a young life insurance salesman who had but recently taken up that line of work. After hearing what was said on the subject of imagination, he began to apply what he had heard to his own problem of selling life insurance. Something was said during the lecture about the value of allied effort, through which men may enjoy greater success by cooperative effort, through a working arrangement under which each boosts the interests of the other. Taking this suggestion as his cue, the young man in question immediately formulated a plan whereby he gained the cooperation of a group of businessmen who were in no way connected with the insurance business. Going to the leading grocer in his town, he made arrangements with that grocer to give a $1,000 insurance policy to every customer purchasing no less than $50 worth of groceries each month. He then made it a part of his business to inform people of this arrangement and brought in many new customers. The grocerman had a large, neatly lettered card placed in his store, informing his customers of this offer of free insurance, thus helping himself by offering all his customers an inducement to do all their trading in the grocery line with him. This young life insurance man then went to the leading gasoline filling station owner in the town and made arrangements with him to insure all customers who purchased all their gasoline, oil, and other motor supplies from him. Next, he went to the leading restaurant in the town and made a similar arrangement with the owner. Incidentally, this alliance proved to be quite profitable to the restaurant man, who promptly began Charles Chaplin makes $1 million a year out of a funny, shuffling walk and a pair of baggy trousers because he does something different. Take the hint and individualize yourself with some distinctive idea. An advertising campaign in which he stated that his food was so pure, wholesome, and good that all who ate at his place regularly would be apt to live much longer. Therefore, he would insure the life of each regular customer for $1,000. The life insurance salesman then made arrangements with a local builder and real estate man to insure the life of each person buying property from him, for an amount sufficient to pay off the balance due on the property in case the purchaser died before payments were completed. The young man in question is now the general agent for one of the largest life insurance companies in the United States, with headquarters in one of the largest cities in Ohio, and his income now averages well above $25,000 a year. The turning point in his life came when he discovered how he might make practical use of the law of imagination. There is no patent on his plan. It may be duplicated over and over again by other life insurance men who know the value of imagination. Just now, if I were engaged in selling life insurance, I think I should make use of this plan by allying myself with a group of automobile distributors in each of several cities, thus enabling them to sell more automobiles and at the same time providing for the sale of a large amount of life insurance through their efforts. Financial success is not difficult to achieve after one learns how to make practical use of creative imagination. Someone with sufficient initiative and leadership and the necessary imagination will duplicate the fortunes being made each year by the owners of 5 and 10-cent stores by developing a system of marketing the same sort of goods now sold in these stores with the aid of vending machines. This will save a fortune in clerk hire, insure against theft, and cut down the overhead of store operation in many other ways. Such a system can be conducted just as successfully as food can be dispensed with the aid of automatic vending machines. The seed of the idea has been here sown. It is yours for the taking. Someone with an inventive turn of the mind is going to make a fortune and at the same time save thousands of lives each year by perfecting an automatic railroad crossing control that will reduce the number of automobile accidents on crossings. The system, when perfected, will work somewhat after this fashion. 100 yards or so before reaching the railroad crossing, the automobile will cross a platform somewhat on the order of a large-scale platform used for weighing heavy objects, and the weight of the automobile will lower a gate and ring a gong. This will force the automobile to slow down. After the lapse of 1 minute, the gate will again rise and the car may continue on its way. Meanwhile, there will have been plenty of time for observation of the track in both directions to make sure that no trains are approaching. Imagination plus some mechanical skill will give the motorist this much-needed safeguard and make the man who perfects the system all the money he needs and much more besides. Some inventor who understands the value of imagination and has a working knowledge of the radio principle may make a fortune by perfecting a burglar alarm system that will signal police headquarters and at the same time switch on lights and ring a gong in the place about to be burglarized, with the aid of apparatus similar to that now used for broadcasting. Any farmer with enough imagination to create a plan, plus the use of a list of all automobile licenses issued in his state, may easily work up a clientele of motorists who will come to his farm and purchase all the vegetables he can produce and all the chickens he can raise, thus saving him the expense of hauling his products to the city. By contracting with each motorist for the season, the farmer may accurately estimate the amount of produce he should provide. The advantage to the motorist accruing under the arrangement is that he will be sure of direct from the farm produce, at less cost than he could purchase it from local dealers. The roadside gasoline filling station owner can make effective use of imagination by placing a lunch stand near his filling station, and then doing some attractive advertising along the road in each direction, calling attention to his barbecue, homemade sandwiches, or whatever else he may wish to specialize on. The lunch stand will cause the motorists to stop, and many of them will purchase gasoline before starting on their way again. These are simple suggestions, involving no particular amount of complication in connection with their use, yet it is just such uses of imagination that bring financial success. The Piggly Wiggly self-help store plan, which made millions of dollars for its originator, was a very simple idea which anyone could have adopted, yet consider able imagination was required to put the idea to work in a practical sort of way. The more simple and easily adapted to a need an idea is, the greater is its value, as no one is looking for ideas which are involved with great detail or in any manner complicated. Imagination is the most important factor entering into the art of selling. The master salesman is always one who makes systematic use of imagination. The outstanding merchant relies upon imagination for the ideas which make his business excel. Imagination may be used effectively in the sale of even the smallest articles of merchandise, such as ties, shirts, hosiery, and so on. Let us proceed to examine just how this may be done. I walked into one of the best-known haberdasheries in the city of Philadelphia for the purpose of chasing some shirts and ties. As I approached the tie counter, a young man stepped forward and inquired, "Is there something you want?" Now, if I had been the man behind the counter, I would not have asked that question. He ought to have known by the fact that I had approached the tie counter that I wanted to look at ties. I picked up 2 or 3 ties from the counter, examined them briefly, then laid down all but one light blue which somewhat appealed to me. Finally, I laid this one down also, and began to look through the remainder of the assortment. The young man behind the counter then had a happy idea. Picking up a gaudy-looking yellow tie, he wound it around his fingers to show how it would look when tied, and asked, "Isn't this a beauty? Now I hate yellow ties," and the salesman made no particular hit with me by suggesting that a gaudy yellow tie is pretty. If I had been in that salesman's place, I would have picked up the blue tie for which I had shown a decided preference, and I would have wound it around my fingers so as to bring out its appearance after being tied. I would have known what my customer wanted by watching the kinds of ties that he picked up and examined. Moreover, I would have known the particular tie that he liked best by the time he held it in his hands. A man will not stand by a counter and fondle a piece of merchandise which he does not like. If given the opportunity, any customer will give the alert salesman a clue as to the particular merchandise which should be stressed in an effort to make a sale. I then moved over to the shirt counter. Here I was met by an elderly gentleman who asked, "Is there something I can do for you today?" Well, I thought to myself that if he ever did anything for me, it would have to be today, as I might never come back to that particular store again. I told him I wanted to look at shirts, and described the style and color of shirt that I wanted. The old gentleman made quite a hit with me when he replied by saying, "The man who is afraid to give credit to those who help him do a piece of creditable work is so small that opportunity will pass by without seeing him some day. I am sorry, sir, but they are not wearing that style this season, so we are not showing it." I said I knew they were not wearing the style for which I had asked, and for that very reason, among others, I was going to wear it providing I could find it in stock. If there is anything which nettles a man, especially that type of man who knows exactly what he wants and describes it the moment he walks into the store, it is to be told that they are not wearing it this season. Such a statement is an insult to a man's intelligence or to what he thinks is his intelligence, and in most cases it is fatal to a sale. If I were selling goods, I might think what I pleased about a customer's taste, but I surely would not be so lacking in tact and diplomacy as to tell the customer that I thought he didn't know his business. Rather, I would prefer to manage tactfully to show him what I believed to be more appropriate merchandise than that for which he had called, if what he wanted was not in stock. One of the most famous and highly paid writers in the world has built his fame and fortune on the sole discovery that it is profitable to write about that which people already know and with which they are already in accord. The same rule might as well apply to the sale of merchandise. The old gentleman finally pulled down some shirt boxes and began laying out shirts which were not even similar to the shirt for which I had asked. I told him that none of these suited, and as I started to walk out he asked if I would like to look at some nice suspenders. Imagine it. To begin with, I do not wear suspenders, and furthermore, there was nothing about my manner or bearing to indicate that I might like to look at suspenders. It is proper for a salesman to try to interest a customer in wares for which he makes no inquiry, but judgment should be used and care taken to offer something which the salesman has reason to believe the customer may want. I walked out of the store without having bought either shirts or ties, and feeling somewhat resentful because I had been so grossly misjudged as to my tastes for colors and styles. A little further down the street I went into a small, one-man shop which had shirts and ties on display in the window. Here I was handled differently. The man behind the counter asked no unnecessary or stereotyped questions. He took one glance at me as I entered the door, sized me up quite accurately and greeted me with a very pleasant "Good morning, sir." He then inquired, "Which shall I show you first, shirts or ties?" I said I would look at the shirts first. He then glanced at the style of shirt I was wearing, asked my size, and began laying out shirts of the very type and color for which I was searching, without my saying another word. He laid out 6 different styles and watched to see which I would pick up first. I looked at each shirt in turn and laid them all back on the counter, but the salesman observed that I examined one of the shirts a little more closely than the others, and that I held it a little longer. No sooner had I laid this shirt down than the salesman picked it up and began to explain how it was made. He then went to the tie counter and came back with 3 very beautiful blue ties, of the very type for which I had been looking, tied each and held it in front of the shirt, calling attention to the perfect harmony between the colors of the ties and the shirt. Before I had been in the store 5 minutes I had purchased 3 shirts and 3 ties, and was on my way with the package under my arm, feeling that here was a store to which I would return when I needed more shirts and ties. I learned afterwards that the merchant who owns the little shop where I made these purchases pays a monthly rental of $500 for the small store, and makes a handsome income from the sale of nothing but shirts, ties, and collars. He would have to go out of business, with a fixed charge of $500 a month for rent, if it were not for his knowledge of human nature, which enables him to make a very high percentage of sales to all who come into his store. I have often observed women when they were trying on hats, and have wondered why salespeople did not read the prospective buyer's mind by watching her manner of handling the hats. A woman goes into a store and asks to be shown some hats. The salesperson starts bringing out hats and the prospective buyer starts trying them on. If a hat suits her, even in the slightest sort of way, she will keep it on a few seconds or a few minutes, but if she does not like it, she will pull it right off her head the moment the salesperson takes her hands off the hat. Finally, when the customer is shown a hat that she likes, she will begin to announce that fact, in terms which no well-informed salesperson will fail to understand, by arranging her hair under the hat, or pulling it down on her head to just the angle which she likes best, and by looking at the hat from the rear with the aid of a hand mirror. The signs of admiration are unmistakable. Finally, the customer will remove the hat from her head and begin to look at it closely. Then she may lay it aside and permit another hat to be tried on her, in which event the clever salesperson will lay aside the hat just removed, and at the opportune time she will bring it back and ask the customer to try it on again. By careful observation of the customer's likes and dislikes, a clever saleswoman may often sell as many as 3 or 4 hats to the same customer, at one sitting, by merely watching what appeals to the customer, and then concentrating upon the sale of that. The same rule applies in the sale of other merchandise. The customer will, if closely observed, clearly indicate what is wanted, and if the clue is followed, very rarely will a customer walk out without buying. I believe it a conservative estimate when I say that fully 75% of the walkouts, as the non-purchasing customers are called, are due to lack of tactful showing of merchandise. Last fall I went into a hat store to purchase a felt hat. It was a busy Saturday afternoon, and I was approached by a young extra, rush-hour salesman who had not yet learned how to size people up at a glance. For no good reason whatsoever, the young man pulled down a brown derby and handed it to me, or rather tried to hand it to me. I thought he was trying to be funny and refused to take the hat into my hands, saying to him, in an attempt to return his compliment and be funny in turn, "Do you tell bedtime stories also?" He looked at me in surprise, but didn't take the cue which I had offered him. If I had not observed the young man more closely than he had observed me, and sized him up as an earnest but inexperienced extra, I would have been highly insulted, for if there is anything I hate it is a derby of any sort, much less a brown derby. One of the regular salesmen happened to see what was going on, walked over and snatched the brown derby out of the young man's hands, and with a smile on his face intended as a sort of sop to me, said, "What the hell are you trying to show this gentleman anyway? That spoiled my fun, and the salesman, who had immediately recognized me as a gentleman, sold me the first hat he brought out. The customer generally feels complimented when a salesman takes the time to study the customer's personality and lay out merchandise suited to that personality. I went into one of the largest men's clothing stores in New York City a few years ago and asked for a suit, describing exactly what was wanted, but not hot heads go with cold feet. He who loses his temper is usually a bluffer, and when called is a quitter. Mentioning price. The young man, who purported to be a salesman, said he did not believe they carried such a suit, but I happened to see exactly what I wanted hanging on a model and called his attention to the suit. He then made a hit with me by saying, "Oh, that one over there." "That's a high-priced suit." His reply amused me. It also angered me, so I inquired of the young man what he saw about me, which indicated that I did not come in to purchase a high-priced suit. With embarrassment he tried to explain, but his explanations were as bad as the original offense, and I started toward the door, muttering something to myself about dumbbells. Before I reached the door, I was met by another salesman who had sensed by the way I walked and the expression on my face that I was none too well pleased. With tact well worth remembering, this salesman engaged me in conversation while I unburdened my woes, and then managed to get me to go back with him and look at the suit. Before I left the store, I purchased the suit I came in to look at, and two others which I had not intended purchasing. That was the difference between a salesman and one who drove customers away. Moreover, I later introduced two of my friends to this same salesman, and he made sizable sales to each of them. I was once walking down Michigan Boulevard in Chicago when my eye was attracted to a beautiful gray suit in the window of a men's store. I had no notion of buying the suit, but I was curious to know the price, so I opened the door and, without entering, merely pushed my head inside and asked the first man I saw how much the suit in the window was. Then followed one of the cleverest bits of sales maneuvering I have ever observed. The salesman knew he could not sell me the suit unless I came into the store, so he said, "Will you not step inside, sir, while I find out the price of the suit?" Of course he knew the price all the time, but that was his way of disarming me of the thought that he intended trying to sell me the suit. Of course I had to be as polite as the salesman, so I said, "Certainly," and walked inside. The salesman said, "Step right this way, sir, and I will get the information for you." In less than 2 minutes I found myself standing in front of a case with my coat off, getting ready to try on a coat like the one I had observed in the window. After I was in the coat, which happened to fit almost perfectly, which was no accident, thanks to the accurate eyes of an observing salesman, my attention was called to the nice, smooth touch of the material. I rubbed my hand up and down the arm of the coat, as I had seen the salesman do while describing the material, and sure enough, it was a very fine piece of material. By this time I had again asked the price, and when I was told that the suit was only $50, I was agreeably surprised, because I had been led to believe that it might have been priced much higher. However, when I first saw the suit in the window, my guess was that it was priced at about $35, and I doubt that I would have paid that much for it had I not fallen into the hands of a man who knew how to show the suit to best advantage. If the first coat tried on me had been about 2 sizes too large or a size too small, I doubt that any sale would have been made, despite the fact that all ready-to-wear suits sold in the better stores are altered to fit the customer. I bought that suit on the impulse of the moment, as the psychologist would say, and I am not the only man who buys goods on that same sort of impulse. A single slip on the part of the salesman would have lost him the sale of that suit. If he had replied $50 when I asked the price, I would have said, "Thank you," and have gone my way without looking at the suit. Later in the season, I purchased 2 more suits from the same salesman, and if I now lived in Chicago, the chances are that I would buy still other suits from him, because he always showed me suits that were in keeping with my personality. The Marshall Field store in Chicago gets more for merchandise than does any other store of its kind in the country. Moreover, people knowingly pay more at this store and feel better satisfied than if they bought the merchandise at another store for less money. Why is this? Well, there are many reasons, among them the fact that anything purchased at the Field store which is not entirely satisfactory may be returned and exchanged for other merchandise, or the purchase price may be refunded just as the customer wishes. An implied guarantee goes with every article sold in the Field store. Another reason why people will pay more at the Field store is the fact that the merchandise is displayed and shown to better advantage than it is at most other stores. The Field window displays are truly works of art, no less than if they were created for the sake of art alone and not merely to sell merchandise. The same is true of the goods displayed in the store. There is harmony and proper grouping of merchandise throughout the field establishment, and this creates an atmosphere that is much more than merely an imaginary one. Still another reason why the field store can get more for merchandise than most other merchants is due to the careful selection and supervision of salespeople. One would seldom find a person employed in the field store whom one would not be willing to accept as a social equal or as a neighbor. Not a few men have made the acquaintance of girls in the field store who later became their wives. Merchandise purchased in the field store is packed or wrapped more artistically than is common in other stores, which is still another reason why people go out of their way and pay higher prices to trade there. While we are on the subject of artistic wrapping of merchandise, I wish to relate the experience of a friend of mine, which will not fail to convey a very definite meaning to those engaged in the business of selling, as it shows how imagination may be used even in wrapping merchandise. This friend had a very fine silver cigarette case which he had carried for years, and of which he was very proud because it was a gift from his wife. Constant usage had banged the case up rather badly. It had been bent, dented, the hinges warped, and so on, until he decided to take it to Caldwell the jeweler in Philadelphia to be repaired. He left the case and asked them to send it to his office when it was ready. About 2 weeks later, a splendid-looking new delivery wagon with the Caldwell name on it drew up in front of his office, and a nice-looking young man in a neat uniform stepped out with a package that was artistically wrapped and tied with a ribbon-tape string. The package happened to be delivered to my friend on his birthday, and having forgotten about leaving the cigarette case to be repaired, and observing the beauty and size of the package that was handed to him, he naturally imagined that someone had sent him a birthday present. His secretary and other workers in his office gathered around his desk to watch him open up his present. He cut the ribbon and removed the outer covering. Under this was a covering of tissue paper, fastened with beautiful gold seals bearing the Caldwell initials and trademark. This paper was removed, and behold, a most beautiful plush-lined box met his eyes. The box was opened, and after removing the tissue paper packing, there was a cigarette case which he recognized, after careful examination, as the one he had left to be repaired, but it did not look like the same case, thanks to the imagination of the Caldwell manager. Mstler became the most successful hotel man in the world by rendering more service and better service than his guests were asked to pay for. Every dent had been carefully straightened out. The hinges had been trued and the case had been polished and cleaned so it shone as it did when it was first purchased. Simultaneously, a prolonged ooh of admiration came from the onlookers, including the owner of the cigarette case. And the bill, it was a plenty, and yet the price charged for the repair did not seem too high. As a matter of fact, everything that entered into the transaction, from the packing of the case, with the fine tissue paper cover, the gold seals, the ribbon tape string, the delivery of the package by a neatly uniformed boy from a well-appointed new delivery wagon, was based upon carefully calculated psychology which laid the foundation for a high price for the repair. People generally do not complain of high prices, providing the service or embellishment of the merchandise is such as to pave the way for high prices. What people do complain of, and rightly so, is high prices and sloppy service. To me, there was a great lesson in this cigarette case incident, and I think there's a lesson in it for any person who makes a business of selling any sort of merchandise. The goods you are selling may actually be worth all you are asking for them, but if you do not carefully study the subjects of advantageous display and artistic packing, you may be accused of overcharging your customers. On Broad Street in the city of Philadelphia, there is a fruit shop where those who patronize the store are met at the door by a man in uniform who opens the door for them. He does nothing else but merely open the door, but he does it with a smile, even though it be a carefully studied and rehearsed smile, which makes the customer feel welcome even before he gets inside of the store. This fruit merchant specializes on specially prepared baskets of fruit. Just outside the store is a big blackboard on which are listed the sailing dates of the various ocean liners leaving New York City. This merchant caters to people who wish baskets of fruit delivered on board departing boats on which friends are sailing. If a man's sweetheart, or perhaps his wife or a very dear friend, happens to be sailing on a certain date, he naturally wants the basket of fruit he purchases for her to be embellished with frills and trimmings. Moreover, he is not necessarily looking for something cheap or even inexpensive, all of which the fruit merchant capitalizes. He gets from $10 to $25 for a basket of fruit which one could purchase just around the corner, not more than a block away, for from $3 to $7.50, with the exception that the latter would not be embellished with the 75 cents worth of frills which the former contains. This merchant's store is a small affair, no larger than the average small fruit stand store, but he pays a rent of at least $15,000 a year for the place and makes more money than 100 ordinary fruit stands combined, merely because he knows how to display and deliver his wares so they appeal to the vanity of the buyers. This is but another proof of the value of imagination. The American people, and this means all of them, not merely the so-called rich, are the most extravagant spenders on earth, but they insist on class when it comes to appearances such as wrapping and delivery and other embellishments which add no real value to the merchandise they buy. The merchant who understands this and has learned how to mix imagination with his merchandise may reap a rich harvest in return for his knowledge. And a great many are doing it too. The salesman who understands the psychology of proper display, wrapping, and delivery of merchandise, and who knows how to show his wares to fit the whims and characteristics of his customers, can make ordinary merchandise bring fancy prices, and what is more important still, he can do so and still retain the patronage of his customers more readily than if he sold the same merchandise without the studied appeal and the artistic wrapping and delivery service. In a cheap restaurant where coffee is served in heavy, thick cups and the silverware is tarnished or dirty, a ham sandwich is only a ham sandwich, and if the restaurant keeper gets 15 cents for it, he is doing well. But just across the street, where the coffee is served in dainty thin cups on neatly covered tables by neatly dressed young women, a much smaller ham sandwich will bring a quarter, to say nothing of the cost of the tip to the waitress. The only difference in the sandwiches is merely in appearances. The ham comes from the same butcher and the bread from the same baker, whether purchased from the former or the latter restaurant. The difference in price is very considerable, but the difference in the merchandise is not a difference of either quality or quantity so much as it is of atmosphere or appearances. People love to buy appearance or atmosphere, which is merely a more refined way of saying that which P.T. Barnum said about one being born every minute. It is no overstatement of fact to say that a master of sales psychology could go into the average merchant's store, where the stock of goods was worth, let us say, $50,000, and at very slight additional expense make the stock bring $60,000 to $75,000. He would do nothing except coach the salespeople on the proper showing of the merchandise, after having purchased a small amount of more suitable fixtures, perhaps, and repacked the merchandise in more suitable coverings and boxes. A man's shirt packed one to the box, in the right sort of a box, with a piece of ribbon and a sheet of tissue paper added for embellishment, can be made to bring $1 or $1.50 more than the same shirt would bring without the more artistic packing. I know this is true, and I have proved it more times than I can recall, to convince some skeptical merchant who had not studied the effect of proper displays. Conversely stated, I have proved many times that the finest shirt made cannot be sold for half its value if it is removed from its box and placed on a bargain counter with inferior-looking shirts, both of which examples prove that people do not know what they are buying, that they go more by appearances than they do by actual analysis of the merchandise they purchase. This is noticeably true in the purchase of automobiles. The American people want and demand style in the appearance of automobiles. What is under the hood or in the rear axle they do not know and really do not care, as long as the car looks the part. Henry Ford required nearly 20 years of experience to learn the truth of the statement just made, and even then, despite all of his analytical ability, he only acknowledged the truth when forced to do so by his competitors. If it were not true that people buy appearances more than they buy reality, Ford never would have created his new automobile. That car is the finest sort of example of a psychologist who appeals to the tendency which people have to purchase, appearance, although, of course, it must be admitted that in this particular example the real value of the car actually exists. Great achievement is usually born of great sacrifice and is never the result of selfishness. In 16 Lessons teaching, for the first time in the history of the world, the true philosophy upon which all personal success is built. By the end, you have been listening to The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill, Volume 3 of 8, narrated by Michael Stone. Thank you for listening. Find more free wealth classics on our YouTube channel, Audiobook Empire. Subscribe for a new classic every week.